Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Now, I would request to Mona first to start the session. Mona.
Okay. So I think everybody has settled by now. Without much further ado, we shall start our today's web seminar. First of all, I would welcome a very warm welcome to everyone who has joined this web seminar today. I'm Mona Mangotra, and I'm going to be your host for the day. So, starting with this event, I would like to thank everyone who has taken time from their busy schedules to attend this event, especially our speakers and our dear moderator, who with such packed schedules have come to join this event and will be sharing their insightful views on this India-Indonesia regional web seminar. This event is organized by Eastern Interest in collaboration with Ruang International. Eastern Interest is a youth-led organization which I'm really sorry everyone for the connectivity issue. I am staying in Jammu and Kashmir, so that's pretty much evident. I'm really sorry. So Eastern Interest is a youth-led organization by the young students from Delhi University, Department of East Asian Studies, which just started last year with the Mayor WhatsApp group. This organization mainly focuses on the Indo-Pacific region and the current happenings of the Indo-Pacific region. Ruang International is an Indonesia-based youth organization empowering fellow young students and has organized many events globally. So I would like to extend my thanks to Ruang International now. Without further ado, let's hop into this web seminar, which will mainly focus on one key question which emerges whenever the Southeast Asian region comes into the question, that is, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. ASEAN promotes intergovernmental cooperation and facilitates economic, political, and socio-cultural growth in the Southeast Asian regions. As we all know, the geopolitical world has never been stable. So with the current happenings of the geopolitical world, one question has emerged, that is how ASEAN will maintain its sovereignty when the surroundings or the key aspects which make the cooperation go on stable in a sense, how will it go on? So this web seminar today will focus on maintaining ASEAN sovereignty and what role India and Indonesia can play. So I would like to invite Mr. Ashish Dangwal, the co-founder of Eastern Interest, to provide us with introductory remarks for this web seminar. Mr. Ashish Dangwal, please.
Thank you so much, Mona. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to wish you all a very happy Dussehra and wanted to express my deepest gratitude towards our speakers, moderators for accepting our invitation. Sir, ma'am, thank you so much for enlightening us with your presence. I'm sure we will get many different perspectives from both the sides, from Indonesia and from Indian side, of different domains ranging from security, culture, history, and even international law too. We are expecting that. Last but not least, Team Eastern Interest wanted to thank Ruang International for this collab and making this event possible. Thank you so much once again. Now I would request to Mona to go ahead with the session first.
Yes, thank you, Ashish, for your wonderful remarks. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce the speakers who will be sharing their wonderful, insightful views on this event. First of all, I'm going to introduce Dr. Pankaj Jha, who is an associate professor and associate dean research at Jindal School of International Affairs. He was a director of research at the Indian Council of World Affairs for more than 2.5 years. He has worked as a deputy director with the National Security Council Secretariat and was closely associated with the national security apparatus in India. He has been a member of high-level delegations to UK, Israel, and other countries. He has authored 2 books on India and China, in Southeast Asia, Competition or Cooperation, 2013 published, and India and Oceania, Exploring Vistas of Cooperation, 2016 published. So we have such a wonderful speaker today. Thank you, Dr. Pankaj Ja, for joining us today, and we'll be very thankful and joyous to hear from you today.
Thank you.
Now, thank you, sir.
Yeah, you want to continue with introducing the CVs of other speakers? You can please
Yes,
do
sir.
so. Please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So now moving on to the next speaker of the session today, I'm going to introduce Angle Damayanti. She is an associate professor in the international relations at the Universitas Kristen Indonesia, UKI, Jakarta, and currently serving as a dean at the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences. She received a bachelor degree from UKI in 2000, her first Master of Science at Universitas Indonesia in 2007, and second MSc from RSIS NTU Singapore in 2012. As you can see, she has done a lot in her career, and she is currently a dean in Indonesia. She has written many publications in the Indo-Pacific Maritime Cooperation, like ASEAN Mechanisms on the Security Towards Competition or Cooperation. She is very much interested, or her research interests span both security studies, including terrorism and maritime in Asia Pacific, which made her conduct a number of research and publications on it. Thank you, Ms. Angle Damayanti, for joining us today. We'll be very happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Mona, for inviting me. You can call me Angel, actually. I think it's a common name everywhere, yeah. And Damayanti, I think it's a common name also in India. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you for correcting me, Ms. Angel. Yeah. So moving on to the next speaker, Dr. Kotham Kumar Ja. He is an associate professor at the Center for Chinese and Southeast Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He is also concurrent faculty at the Center for E-Learning, JNU, and visiting faculty in the Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts. His area of specialization is in the Islamization of Indonesian polity, Sufism, and Shiva cult in the Indonesia and the Indonesian folklores. He is also the recipient of several national level awards and has also received a special token of appreciation from the Indonesian Minister of Commerce for disseminating Indonesian language and culture in India. So thankfully, we're very thankful to Dr. Gautam Kumar Ja for joining us today. I mean, he's a wonderful person, and looking at his profile, I mean, we were very lucky to hear from him. Now moving on to the last speaker for the day, Mr. Aristio Rizkadarmawan is an Indonesian academic writer and researcher. Currently, he's a lecturer in international law and co-director at the Center of the Sustainable Ocean Policy at the University of Indonesia. He received his bachelor in law from University of Indonesia, then his LLM from Tufts University of USA, and has also received different certificate courses from Hague Academy of International Law. Pretty wonderful, isn't it? So, I mean, we'll be hearing from different views from all over, all domains which exist in this, international law, society, culture, I mean, maritime security. So it will be such a wonderful session for all to hear from all of you. Lastly, the key person which is going to moderate our session today, I mean, the lifeline of this session, Ms. Amrita Dhillon. She is a co-founder and chief editor of the Kutniti, a New Delhi-based publisher specialized in international relations and diplomacy, a renowned scholar with prior experience of working with the UNDP. Oh my God, it's such a wonderful organization. She holds degrees in international relations and global communication from Annamalai University and the National University of Singapore. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Amrita ma'am to moderate our session and start with the event today.
Thank you
for joining us. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Amrita Dhillon, moderator of this panel on maintaining ASEAN sovereignty and what role can India and Indonesia play. Before introducing the panelists, here's a quick view on India-ASEAN relations. ASEAN and Southeast Asia shares century-old relations with India. In Cambodia, Thailand, Indonesia, Brunei, today many symbolic remnants of Indian influence are clearly visible in their art, culture, and civilization. Through the centuries, India has been a source of inspiration for art and architecture in countries belonging to the present day ASEAN. It must be said that Southeast Asia did not accept all foreign influences in any indiscriminate manner. Two notably important external influences came from China and India. But the Southeast Asia accepted only the influence and practices that were suitable for their local cultures, which make me reiterate my statement that they did not accept all foreign influences in any undiscriminate manner. Yet India's culture quenched were peacefully and without forced conversation. There was no evidence of violence, colonization, and subjecting, and there was no extensive migration from India to the countries of Southeast Asia. In fact, the current Indian origin people in Indonesia are 120,000, which is not a big number. Southeast Asia was particularly attracted to Indian maritime class, and they named them faraway lands. Land of gold, land of cardamom, land of coconuts. And since then, the trade have evolved from coconuts to now exporting crude, the petroleum products, agriculture products. Then you have the telecommunication products being exported, and plus the biggest there that we have now is the palm oil that we are importing from Indonesia, which is strengthening our relationship. Recent pulling out of the RCP too created a buzz, uh, but I would leave that to a panelist to go in the details that how it would have helped or did not help or can help India. However, in this COVID situation, the world order and India's trade with ASEAN, despite being an immediate neighbor, has changed. And so is the geopolitics. The geopolitics stability in the Indo-Pacific region has taken center stage in shaping the dynamics of India and ASEAN strategic cooperation in recent years. In the context, New Delhi's Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative IPOI proposed at the 14th East Asia Summit in Bangkok in November 2019 is considered as a landmark intervention by India and and is a potential game changer in the propelling robust engagement between India and ASEAN. We further see more regional cooperation coming in terms of socio-economic fronts, socio-cultural fronts, which could lead to safety, maritime security, and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. IPOI is bringing India and ASEAN members closer, working together as natural partners in the tactile and strategic manner, which can be a big game changing in the coming years, or maybe in the plan of their 2025, 5 years down the lane. So now I think that was a very small introduction to the ASEAN in terms of the culture that we share, the economy now that we share, the economic growth, the commercial growth that has boomed from last 2018, 2020, which is a big number. And plus the strategic partnership that India and Indonesia and ASEAN are coming together in Indo-Pacific to deal with the geopolitics of the area, their security, maritime security, plus enhancing the commerce in the area. So with this, I wouldn't take very long because we have the experts who can really get us more information into this. So I'll hand over to Dr. Pankaj Jha to give his view on how India and Indonesia can contribute and can maintain ASEAN sovereignty at the same time. Over to you, Dr. Pankaj Jha.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Eastern interest. Thank you, Ruang International, and all those who are listening to me. I just check. I'm just checking whether I am loud and clear to all of you. Is it okay? Okay. So that's good. Okay. The task of the initial speaker is to outline things, and he can be a constructive and he can be a destructive person both ways at the same time if he's confused and nervous all at the same time. It happens with most of the speakers who are speaking and taking the first point with regard to the topic which has been really floated in front of me. The question really happens that whether ASEAN sovereignty with regard to the region, whether ASEAN centrality is under duress. And I believe ASEAN has survived over phases, and the phases because it has acclimatized itself. It has upgraded itself in such a way that it is able to address questions which will be futuristic in nature and which requires due attention from the region perspective. When you look into this whole concept of regionness, and you will find, Southeast Asia, which was really proposed by Britishers with regard to, war dynamics, and looking into from the strategic regional perspective as such. But in terms of geography also, you will find that few geographies have been created, and it provides the new fulcrum for decisions, for camaraderie, for community building. And this has been much more debated in this whole debate with regard to regionness. Now coming to this ASEAN itself, we have seen ASEAN graduated from 1967 as a communist bloc, and then in 1980s, 90s, and subsequently getting into all those countries which were really on the periphery, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, all joined it. And subsequently, it was seen as a very progressive organization. And the reasons is because of the fact that Northeast Asia doesn't had a regional organization to address their questions. And within South Asia, SAARC was not able to really come up to the mark because of political differences between major players. Again, ASEAN, this whole question of consensus building, and non-interference has always been addressed in 1990s. And therefore, ASEAN took this onus of developing itself, upgrading itself, and justifying that it is there for certain reasons, addressing both security and non-traditional security issues all at the same time. ASEAN has grown and grown in terms of multiple affiliate organizations and also giving birth to new organizations, new concepts, and new constructs. And this has also promoted a kind of an understanding that ASEAN was seen as a parallel to the European Union, and there has been much developments and much comparative studies which have been done in the past, way back in year 2000 and subsequently. The challenge for ASEAN came when it has to really upgrade itself, because there were new constructs like Indo-Pacific, or in the past Asia-Pacific also took shape in 1990s, and therefore gave birth to an organization which was known as Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. Indo-Pacific again is in a way getting more subscription very lately. UK also talking about it. Germany has an Indo-Pacific strategy which is outlined by a 72 pages document. France again is talking about Indo-Pacific and says that it wants to get interested into this whole new construct, new region, which is Indo-Pacific. Within ASEAN itself, which is technically the core, which is the hub where ASEAN centrality is critical, the periphery, which primarily means the dialogue partner, the 10 dialogue partners, are really making a lot of stakes, a lot of demands, and which somehow is really putting a stress on these ASEAN mechanisms. It is well acknowledged that ASEAN does have near about 300 meetings, more than 300 meetings, in different consultative processes. You take about security, you take about cyber, you take about food, you take about climate change, you take about humanitarian assistance. All of these have been taking shape. And at times, the question have been raised that institutions like ARF, ASEAN Regional Forum, and many others have just tried to translate itself into more talk shops, and there is nothing much which is being done. Now, this whole construct, this whole narrative is being built just to question whether ASEAN is adept at changing itself, or whether there is a need for much more better management and better, leaner and meaner ASEAN, which can address, again, this whole question of security in a proper way. Yes, of course, non-traditional security issues has been addressed in the best possible way, but ASEAN is now being questioned for security and what exactly has been the position of ASEAN itself. You need to understand this regional challenges from ASEAN perspective are mounting, and so are the consultative processes. The thing is that whether ASEAN institutional processes have remained central and would remain central is a big question. Why I'm saying is the fact that until and unless East Asia Summit becomes a formal structure, ASEAN centrality will be completely addressed in most of the forums. And you have seen statements from US, Japan, and all the countries, particularly Quad countries, buttressing their faith on the ASEAN centrality. But as I talked about, there is also a new structure which is on the table and which is somehow challenging this whole epicenter of geopolitical developments, which is Southeast Asia. You have Quad 2.0, which seems to be a high table, and which is proposing new minilaterals and hub and spokes model with new Quad plus formulations, which are put on table. But is this the new phenomena in the ASEAN history, in the ASEAN evolution? I would say no, because way back in 2009, when ASEAN was facing some problems with regard to internal discussions, with regard to differences on a number of issues, the Japanese Prime Minister, Yukoi Hatoyama, had proposed a construct which was known as East Asian Community. And around the same time, Kevin Rudd, the Australian Prime Minister, have also proposed Asia-Pacific Community as such. And subsequently, which we have found that ASEAN tried to really evolve itself and addressing maritime issues, defense issues, through different sort of organizations which can address these new emerging challenges. And in a way, it has engaged dialogue partners in the best possible way, which was there. If you look into the current situation, if you look into these current issues which are being proposed, and we definitely look forward for what exactly was there from the Indian side, from the Indonesian side, to propose to bring about these two, the ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific together. And we find a statement from ASEAN which takes cognizance of this Indo-Pacific and also really proposes an outlook towards Indo-Pacific, which says that it cannot really compromise its centrality while addressing this utility of Indo-Pacific. And therefore, it addresses one core prime important issues, which is maritime security, and which is accepted by all that it is a core security issue, and therefore it should be taken into stride. Now, if you look into ASEAN and how it has evolved, and there are certain issues which have raised up way back after the Cambodia communique could not be really coming out from the ASEAN stable itself, and everybody said that this is unprecedented and this should not have happened, because this clearly marks that there are certain differences, there are certain frictions within the ASEAN structure, which might not be good because it is putting a due stress on this whole edifice as such. But now, again, ASEAN is facing the same kind of question. And why I'm saying this is the fact that there are issues with regard to Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, which has not been addressed, which has not been complied by many of the countries, addressing their own preferences, strategic interest, and tactical issues as such. But then there have been new concoctions which have been proposed, which include India proposing Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, then security and growth for all in the region. And meanwhile, Indonesia also grew up while addressing these issues. And it addressed a wonderful idea, and I must acknowledge this fact, the global maritime fulcrum, where it wanted to really put everything in perspective and bring something on board. Even this whole concept of Indo-Pacific Treaty, bringing on board all those stakeholders and bringing up a better congenial environment for sustenance of different concepts. ASEAN is existent, but Indo-Pacific is still in epidermis, level where it is still in a blueprint, which is still being seen as such. But where there is a benefit of ASEAN is it has a structure. Indo-Pacific is an imagination, geopolitical imagination, which is still yet to find roots in terms of political homogeneity with regard to economics, with regard to socio-economic and cultural community per se as such. But this clearly gives ASEAN a breathing space to upgrade and prioritize its working itself. The question which has already been asked, whether there are economic deliverables which will be feasible now when RCEP is under slight kind of a stress because India has not joined as such, because one of the biggest markets in this region, and also how this whole investment, how foreign direct investment, how building up a resilient supply chain will really evolve in near future. So all of these have given a buffer zone of next 5 to 10 years for ASEAN to upgrade, update, and bring in an introspective, consultative agenda so as to bring about changes. And ASEAN has done that in the past itself, and I believe it will be doing it again. Now, I'm coming to the last part of my presentation itself, that how India and Indonesia can bring about some semblance, some sanity, and buttress this centrality, this utility, and protect the sovereignty, ASEAN sovereignty per se as such. If you look into India, India has always, again and again, said on this very fact that ASEAN is central to any security layout, any security agenda which is prevalent in Southeast Asia, and we completely support that. And we have undertaken like science and technology projects, connectivity projects, integrating, and you find India, Mekong India economic corridor, and integrating this and bringing this whole supply chain demand from the markets into one fold itself. India is one big country in Southern Asia, and Indonesia is one of the critical, I buttress the fact, one of the critical countries in this whole region because it conjoins Southeast Asia and Oceania together. So in terms of working it out and looking into it, and I would definitely look forward for the remarks by my Indonesian colleagues, my fellow academicians and panelists as such. India has outlined that how it really wants to look into it. If you look into India ASEAN, Plan of Action 2021-2025, it has addressed issues regarding defense, security, digital economy, integrating and developing human resources, and how better complementarities can be developed in the near future. Fourth industrial revolution is where ASEAN has started way ahead than many other economies and has been working great. And India will definitely like to take certain lessons, certain standard operating procedures with the ASEAN things. ASEAN need to address, and I believe from the Indian side is very critical, issues with regard to cyber, issues with regard to space, issues with regard to food and water security, which are going to come up, and therefore this will bring about more efficiency as such. From Indian side, what do we expect from Indonesia per se as such? There are minilaterals, there are trilaterals which are being developed. At the track 2 level, you will find India is engaging Indonesia through the track 2 dialogue with Australia, and very recently Japan also visited Indonesia, and India is also keen to engage Indonesia in a new way. Maybe there might be a new trilateral which might be hovering in around, which includes Japan, India, and Indonesia together to address questions with regard to security, complementarities, and developing economic cohesion between these two sides itself. So this whole thing, which involves both India and Indonesia, needs to be looked at from two different perspectives. First, whether this political commitment, political synergies between the two countries can help ASEAN to survive the onslaught which is being thrown at it from the point of view of utility, from the point of view of futuristic aspect, and addressing major challenges which are coming underway. Pandemic is one element of it. The second thing is with regard to economics. Whenever this whole Indo-Pacific edifice comes into being, and there might be a new structure, maybe it might be East Asia Summit, which might really translate into Indo-Pacific per se as such, or Indo-Pacific Economic Community, which might take shape in near future, then how India and Indonesia are really going to look into it, both from the point of view of two large economies of the region, and how FDI and other aspects can be contributed to bring about this larger region, because India has already said that they have a division which is known as Oceania and Ministry of External Affairs, which looks into ASEAN, Indo-Pacific, and all those things are into under this one complete division, which shows case that India looks into Oceania and also aspects like blue economy, energy, fisheries, and also addressing core security issues. So therefore, I rest my case over here, and I believe there is a moment of transition. There is a moment which really addresses the challenges which are going to come up. And being the two largest countries and economies of the region, I believe the role that India and Indonesia can play will be of very significance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pankaj. As we heard about the crucial role of India and Indonesia in Indo-Pacific security, especially with respect to ASEAN, we understand that there are need of collaboration between trilaterals and multilaterals and come up with and look if ASEAN is ready for a new version or a set of improvement where they are ready for a new laterals that can build in and come up with the constructive ideas on that. To listen to our now we would like to listen to the counterpart, our panelist from Indonesia, Miss Angel Damayanti, if I'm not.
Yes, thank you, Miss
Okay.
Amrita
I'm
Dilan.
sure I hope I took your name right.
Yes, very right. Thank you. Thank you.
The
Okay.
stage is
Thank you. I think I have sent the slides for my presentation. So I mean, will the organizer show my presentation, or I just do it by myself?
you can do it on yourself by yourself, or I can do it for you if you want to.
Okay, let me check. I have to open it first then. Wait a
Okay,
minute.
sure.
Okay. Okay, sorry for taking your time. So now, can you all see my presentation here, the slides? Yes, okay, great. Okay, good afternoon all. I hope everyone here is happy and healthy. And I'm sorry I'm still in the public area, so I'm sorry if there is, kind of a noisy voice or some people comes in and out. So yeah, please forgive me about that. So yes, I'm about to talk about Indo-Pacific connectivity and the role of ASEAN. And thank you to Dr. Pankaj Ja that has, give us such a comprehensive and very good point of view about ASEAN and Indonesia. And for this afternoon, I'm going to explain first about the significance about Indo-Pacific region itself. And since there are a lot of my students from first semester in international relations, so perhaps I have to explain a bit about Indo-Pacific connectivity. And then I will explain about maritime policies of Indo-Pacific states and the implication of the policies. And then we come to the role of ASEAN and how Indonesia can play its role here. So according to 2013 Australian defense white paper, the concept of Indo-Pacific initially refers to China and its relationship with the US, India, Japan, Korea, and Indonesia. And this idea also refers to Asian countries bordering the Indian Ocean and Western Pacific Ocean, including the 10 ASEAN member states, because it lies, or this member state of ASEAN lies right in the center of these two oceans. But then our former foreign affairs minister, Mr. Martin Natalegawa, same in the 2013, mentioned that this Indo-Pacific can be also defined as an economic and security connection between countries in the Indian Ocean and the Western Pacific Ocean that creates a strategic system reaching South Asian, like India and Pakistan, so on and so forth, the Southeast Asian countries and East Asian countries, in order to promote the prosperity, security, and stability. And then so we can see here the map of Indo-Pacific region covering the South Asian, Southeast Asian, and then East Asian, and some part of Asia Pacific. So now we come to the significance of Indo-Pacific regions. Why this Indo-Pacific region becomes significant, at least for Indonesia or ASEAN perspective. There are two main reasons why these countries, China, India, and ASEAN member states are becoming increasingly active in this Indo-Pacific region. I mean, first, because of the strategic role of the seas in the region. We need the seas of Indian Ocean and Western Pacific Ocean, the Strait Malacca, for the sea lanes of communication and the sea-based trade route. And secondly, because of the strategic role and the abundance of natural resources, including fisheries as well as the oil and gas reserve in this ocean, so there are also a high number of threats in the Indian and Pacific Ocean comes from the state and non-state actors. I will explain it later. And then, sorry. Okay, about the significance, about the strategic role of Indo-Pacific waters. From the US EIA in 2014 stated that more than 15 million barrels oil per day flow from the Persian Gulf through the Indian Ocean, the Malacca Strait, South China Sea, and West Pacific Ocean to Asian countries and the US. And they need this gas oil, for their industry, of course. And around 7 million barrels of oil and petroleum products, which were equivalent to 20% of the world sea oil trade, passed through the Strait of Malacca as the main entrance and the shortest sea route from Persian Gulf to East Asian countries. And then we can say that these waters, in Indo-Pacific have such a great supply of oil and gas, as well as fisheries and other aquatic products that give, of course, many advantages for the littoral states. There are many estimations according to, let's say, the US Geological Survey. They estimated that South China Sea may contain between 5 and 22 billion barrels of oil and between 70 nearly 300 trillion cubic feet of gas. And in 2012, the CNOOC also estimated that potential resources in South China Sea holding around 125 billion barrels of oil and 500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. So we can say that it's quite a number of oil and gas reservation in this area. And this is also, the aquaculture production comes from the water in Indian Ocean and Pacific waters. We can see that China, Indonesia, and India, we experience or we enjoy such a very good benefit from our aquaculture production, and followed by Vietnam, Philippines, Bangladesh, South Korea, and so on and so forth. So, the problem is that this marine wealth, of course, attracts transnational crimes occur at sea. They are conducted by the state as well as the non-state actors, not only transcend the national boundaries, but also have a global impact. Let's say we have like dispute seas and overlapping claims on East China Sea between China and Japan. And then we also have the South China Sea between China and some ASEAN countries. We also have terrorist attack at sea, such as in the case in Sulu Island between the Philippines and Sulawesi Island of Indonesia in 2016, conducted by Abu Sayyaf Group. And we also experienced such as sea piracy, and as reported by the ICC, International Commercial Chambers, International Maritime Bureau, the piracy attacks in Malacca Strait and Singapore and Indonesian Strait still a great number. It's nearly 36% of all piracy attacks in all the world oceans. And perhaps in Indian Ocean is a smaller number than in our waters in Strait of Malacca. Yeah. And then now let's go to these maritime policies of Indo-Pacific states, because because of the allure as well as the threat that happen in Indo-Pacific state. So many countries in this area, they develop such a new maritime policies. For example, the Indian Navy's defense strategy and policy in 2015 changed from freedom to use the seas to ensuring secure seas. So this defense policy or maritime defense policies adopted a holistic approach from Indian naval and Coast Guard forces to develop the naval power into a balanced multi-dimensional force, combining the use of ships, submarines, and aircraft with spatial satellites and information systems. China also gradually shifted the focus of the PLA Navy from offshore waters defense to a combination of offshore water defense and open seas protection, emphasizing their naval power on combat readiness and military training in real combat conditions. So they also built a combined, multifunctional, flexible, and efficient naval combat structure. And about the US, to continue their rebalancing strategy to Asia Pacific, in 2017, US called for a free and open Indo-Pacific, or FOIP, for their economic cooperation. So therefore, they strengthen the quadrilateral partnership with Japan, Australia, and India, through which the US welcomes India to be a leading global power, stronger strategic and defense partner on one hand, and support a strong leadership of Japan on the other hand, because they are the US, a close partnership. And then through this joint policy, the US also continues to support ASEAN centrality in the regional security architecture and seek to further empower ASEAN. As the US, of course, enjoyed the freedom of navigation from the constructive engagement with ASEAN and its mechanism in the region. I will explain later about the mechanism in ASEAN. And as mentioned by Dr. Pankajai about the Indonesian Global Maritime Fulcrum, in 2014, our President Jokowi was determined to make this GMF, Global Maritime Fulcrum, with 5 focuses. First is to rebuild the Indonesian's maritime culture, to preserve and manage marine resources, to develop marine infrastructure in connectivity, to enhance maritime diplomacy, and to develop its maritime defense. But with a limited budget to safeguard such a great maritime territory, we have such a great, like almost 6 million kilometers square of our territory. So Indonesia must apply a collaborative way, like Ms. Amrita just mentioned, that we need a collaborative way for the improvement of all its forces, mainly the naval power and coast guard, as well as the modernization of our main defense system tools. So what is the implication between, a lot of different and developed policies? First, Indo-Pacific countries have common yet conflicting interests with regards to these maritime issues across Indian and Pacific Oceans. Second, the changing policies into a multi-dimensional, comprehensive, and flexible sea power can be perceived as threat to one another. And despite their differences, almost all states believe that cooperation and joint arrangements are needed to overcome the existing problem and threats that occur mainly at sea, that come both from state and non-state actors. According to Geoffrey Thiel, in his book Sea Power, he tried to differentiate the maritime countries in the world from the traditional, modern, and postmodern countries. We can say that many countries in Indo-Pacific, we are still modern countries who remain focused on national security, territorial integrity, and sovereignty. But we're also moving toward the postmodern state defined by this Geoffrey Thiel, who administer our interests on sea management cooperatively to avoid uncertainty and instability. So what I'm trying to say here that we need a joint, inclusive, and comprehensive maritime arrangement and mechanism. So I'm trying to propose that because we need this joint mechanism, joint maritime arrangement, we need, like, for example, what I'm going to propose is the role of ASEAN here. ASEAN has a great opportunity, of course, to facilitate both major powers and its members when they deal the member state of ASEAN when they deal with major powers' interests in maritime issues. ASEAN also has proven that it was able to promote regional peace, prosperity, and stability in Southeast Asia and East Asia regions currently, such as in the case of South China Sea overlapping claims. For example, ASEAN preferred to bring China to sign the declaration on the South China Sea in 1992, then followed by the 2000 DOC of parties of the South China Sea and the ongoing process of Code of Conduct in South China Sea. So we can say that ASEAN has become a primary driving force in maintaining regional peace, prosperity, security, and stability through several mechanisms where all members can have dialogue and consultation on economic, political, and security issues in a way to confidence-building measures and preventive diplomacy through several mechanisms like I just mentioned to you. We have like ASEAN ministerial meetings. We also have ASEAN Defense Ministerial Meeting, ASEAN Maritime Forum, ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Transnational Crimes, ASEAN Plus 3, ASEAN Plus 6, so on and so forth. So And regarding to this Indo-Pacific connectivity, in June 2019, ASEAN has also launched the ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific that is used as a guide for ASEAN engagement in Indo-Pacific region, by which ASEAN has shown its positive outlook towards the idea of connectivity in Indo-Pacific, because it can be carried out by promoting dialogue and cooperation. We also shared common interests to enhance economic growth and the welfare of countries in the region. However, perhaps Dr. Pankaj Ja also has a highlight about this issue. ASEAN remains had to deal with internal issues such as coordination challenge in the organization itself, with the overlap multiple platforms, and then domestic problems in terms of internal coordination, limited human resources, lack of capacity, the change of political regime, difficulties in placing priorities and strengthening its unity and centrality in responding the major powers such as such as China and the US. So to conclude my presentation this afternoon, we can say that joint arrangement from Indo-Pacific states is needed. It is vital to prevent competition that leads to security dilemma and instability. Without a joint regulatory mechanism, competition from countries in the Indo-Pacific will be more prominent than the cooperation that we create by Indo-Pacific connectivity. ASEAN, as a regional organization in the Southeast Asian region, has been able to demonstrate its expertise through various mechanisms to manage conflicts and maintain security and stability in the region. So ASEAN has the potential to become a driving force that governs our common interests. Yet ASEAN needs more time to be able to prove its centrality and unity in order to play a more effective role in Indo-Pacific connectivity. And Indonesia here, as an ASEAN member state, should take a bigger role in maintaining peace and security in Indo-Pacific maritime by realizing such a regulatory mechanism. So I think that's all from me. Then we can go through the discussion afterward. Thank you very much. Back to Amrita. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel. Thank you for explaining India-Pacific, and especially with the maritime security and how it should be focused, what could be the threats. And I think it's a big discussion there that if we go forward with it, we can gain, and plus we will be on threat because everybody will be in there at the same place. Any ups and downs, and it can turn it upside down. It can be totally different. So now we move to Dr. Gautam Kumar Ja. Hello, doctor. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I can hear you.
Yes. So we move to Dr. Gautam Kumar Ja. We would like to have your views on how India and Indonesia can contribute to ASEAN and Indo-Pacific and this new strategic development that's coming in.
Thank you. I forgot your name.
Amrita.
Amrita. Thank you, Amrita.
You're welcome, sir.
It's been a really very enlightening session today, particularly Dr. Pankaj Ja, who is my senior engineer, and Damayanti. The really wonderful presentations. I'm really thankful to you because I also understood a lot of things. You depicted a completely different perspective, how Indonesia and ASEAN is important in the entire gamut altogether. I was approached by Gyanada a few days back that I should speak on this subject. And then she, again, after 2 days, she asked me what you're going to speak on. And first she told me the topic sovereignty, maintaining sovereignty of ASEAN and the role of India and Indonesia. The first thing that struck into my mind is sovereignty. What is sovereignty altogether? I mean, anyway, sovereignty of ASEAN is not going to be hampered by any power in the vicinity. But of course, there has been an effort to basically breach into the sovereignty of ASEAN states, not by land, of course, in the water. So that is the thing. It came into my mind that I should speak on. Of course, if we talk about India and Indonesia and then ASEAN, then one of the most important aspects, we must speak on the China. And then the rest of the world, they are involved in the present traction of Indo-Pacific and Southeast Asian countries, and also South China Sea. So I thought, just 10 minutes, you told me that you have to speak 10 minutes. 10 minutes is very small, particularly when I told that the most of the stakeholders of this think tanks are involved by students. So I thought, let us speak a little bit about historical aspects, that how India connects with ASEAN countries. ASEAN means Southeast Asian countries, and particularly with Indonesia, that we all know. And I just few years back, I have coined a term called Indic Belt Community. People thought that I'm coming out with a term just parallel to BRIs of China. So Indic Belt Community is as the not moderator, the person who came first, I just forgot her name in the beginning. I forgot her name. She initiated the talk before the moderator came.
Yes,
Mona, sir?
Yeah, Mona. Mona spoke about something I have noted down. I think I'm losing trace of my word file. Just hold on a second. Yeah, she said that there were no colonization efforts from either side. She was talking about historical aspects. Maybe you, the present moderator. It was you or her. Anyway.
It was the moderator. It was the moderator, sir.
It was moderator.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I just wanted to tell you, in the past, when you talk about colonization, हम हिंदी में बात करते हैं क्या, colonization की हिंदी क्या है? हम उपनिवेश बनाते हैं, उपनिवेश बनाते हैं. There was no such things, because it couldn't come into our mind or in their mind, because the entire region was so prosperous. If we see Southeast Asia, Swarnabhumi was entire Malay Peninsula, and Swarnadvipa, Swarnabhumi was Sumatra, and Swarnabhumi was Malay Peninsula, and Yabdupa was Java. So these all places, were part of Indic Belt, and what we say is Greater India. And most of the scholars of Southeast Asian region currently now, they converge on this point that entirety, a majority of the Southeast Asia was part of Greater India. When we talk about Greater India, means these regions were like Janapada. When we talk about Indian classical texts, these regions were the integral part of Indian Bharata's Janapada. So that is the aspects. And she also said that we have centuries of relations between India and Southeast Asia. So I tell you, we have almost 1600 years of interaction. 1600 years, when I say the 1600 years, this is, for this 1600 years, we have documentation. When we talk about historical perspective of Indians and Southeast Asia, and particularly Indonesia. Right? And when we and the relationship, when we have documented relationship, when we see currently, yes, Buddhism went to Indonesia. The Buddhism started, going overseas. It was during Maurya dynasty. That started 321 BC to 185 BC. And Mauryan empires, Asoka the Great, and Chanakya, all the serials are becoming very famous in Southeast Asian countries, and also particularly in Indonesia. Now they are trying to associate themselves. Filipinos take pride in themselves that they are not part of those world or those colonial period, which they, I mean, through the books, through the text, which they try to define themselves. Now they were part of that greater independent society, and they feel proud on this, right? So I'm telling you, my friend, during Maurya dynasty, the Buddhism went to Southeast Asia. 321 BC. Now you can imagine, before Buddhism, the entire region was completely Hinduized, right? Then were Kalinga period. Kalinga period was almost contemporary with Mauryan period. It had vast expanse of littoral area and busy ports for the trade and maritime activities. We talk about maritime security and maritime historical aspects. I think we are more aligned together than any other countries, apart from India, then Southeast Asian, and then beyond Southeast Asia, beyond ASEAN countries. Now, relationship between Kalinga and Indonesia appears to be very deep, as Chinese researchers called Hindu kingdom in Central Java as Holinga, as they had difficulty in pronouncing Kalinga as few names. Somebody called it Thailand, Kalinga, and in Malaysia it is bit derogatory. They say Orang Kling. In Indonesia it is Orang Kalinga, yeah, and Sumatra is Orang Kling, yeah. And now comes Gupta dynasty. After Maurya dynasty comes Gupta dynasty that expanded from 240 to 605 CE. 240. Gupta dynasty is considered to be the golden period of India. Where these epics, which made pervasive impacts, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Puranas, start from Myanmar till Java, Borobudur, and Prambanan temple. As the moderators have already said, you still find the remnants and clear evidences, tangible evidences. Don't talk about intangible, tangible evidences standing across Southeast Asian countries that says this region were an integral part of Indic belt. That now come Pallava dynasty. Now you name me any script of Southeast Asian countries. Thai script, Khmer script, Balinese script, Java script, even Java Kuno. All are directly influenced by Pallava script. You keep Pallava script here. Sorry, I didn't prepare PPT. But you keep Pallava script here and all Southeast Asian script here. They are directly impacted by this. You write Tamil script and then write Thai. You will find it is so close, so similar. So then comes Chola dynasty. Chola dynasty, it was the longest dynasty which ruled over India and the subcontinents of Southeast Asian countries. Rajendra Cholas, the war between Rajendra Cholas and Sri Vijaya of Southeast Asia. Everybody knows. And I think after Chandragupta Maurya and Chanakya and Asoka the Great, I think the Bollywood people guys must make one serial on war between Chola dynasty, war and friendship, both. War and friendship between Chola dynasty and Sri Vijaya of Southeast Asia. Just one Sanskrit couplet I will recite before I go to the fulcrum or important aspects that we have got together today to discuss. Yatnuvanto yabdvipam saptirajyo pashobitam Swarnarupyak dvipam Swarnkaramanditam Yavadvipam saptarajyo pashobitam Swarnam rupyakyam dvipam Swarnkaramanditam. This is a reference of Java and Malay Peninsula in Valmiki's Ramayana. Still, how Ramayana has made its impact on the concerns of the common mass in Indonesia, Thailand, and other countries. It's not a game of 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. It's thousands of years. The culture acculturated. It was customized. It was taken, as moderator said, that they did not take everything from Indian side. Then we do not know what were from their side. Definitely, every region has its own specialty, own culture, and own tradition. Even in India, every state has its own culture. If you go to Kashmir, if you go to Kanyakumari, if you go to different parts of India, region, language, culture changes. Similarly, Javanese culture, one of the most vibrant cultures of the world. You see how they have taken Indian culture, how they have taken Bharatiyata. If you go to bank and they give you cash like this, and you will be very surprised. They give you cash like this. Can you see me like this? They give you cash like this. My wife, every morning, she would pray and offer water to the goddess like this. So this is important aspects that I wanted to discuss with you. We have a very important diaspora present in Southeast Asian countries, but not the way Chinese diaspora is present in Southeast Asia. I'll come on that. Now, first of all, I'm thankful to the organizer, particularly Ruang International. Namanya luar biasa bagus. Ruang International. International place. And Eastern interest. What a great idea. The person who has coined this term, Eastern interest, means he or he is looking at Eastern aspects. India's East is very, very similar to Southeast Asian countries. Now, before I broach over the main topic, I just tell you a little bit that this morning I spoke in a webinar. It is a very important topic on a human and social approach of Islam in education. And my counterpart was from Pakistan. And yesterday I had myself organized a webinar on Swadeshi. What is called Swadeshi, India and Indonesia. Swadeshi is a very old term prevalent in Indonesia, and that we wanted to inculcate in Indonesia. Now, when we talk about sovereignty in Southeast Asia, I mean, if you remove ASEAN, then there is no country left except one East Timor. So I say Southeast Asia. So China's engagement in South China Sea and the stakeholders are Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. The present traction on South China, where we see bigger powers, is basically an aspiration of ASEAN countries. Quote unquote, why did I say aspiration? Could you just hold on? Somebody has just knocked my door. Just a second. Otherwise, there's nobody in the house. Sorry. No, why did I say the aspiration of ASEAN countries?
Sorry to interrupt, sir. We will be having another 5 minutes before we have to wind up.
5 minutes, I'll sum up.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you. So you see, when we say sovereignty, you see the past. And when each and every country in Southeast Asia has got different demography of Chinese diaspora. For example, Singapore has 75% of Chinese diaspora. I mean, Chinese origin people, Chinese Indonesian. Then we have Malaysia, 23%. Then we have Thailand. Then, of course, Indonesia have 4%. And varying, these population is basically what we call that, basically they are banks of the economy. These diaspora are engaged in business, and they basically, what do you call that? I said that they are banks. I mean, they are the mover of the economy of these regions. China knows this pretty well. One of the most, I mean, wisest person and statesman of Southeast Asia for an entire century happened was Lee Kuan Yew, the last president of Singapore. He was the person who experienced, who saw, and who assessed China very well. And you see his speech on YouTube, whatever books, anything available. He was the person who kept China at bay, though Singapore is not stakeholder in South China Sea or any part of, not stakeholder, sea is sea, but any part of the island of Spratly or any other island. But it kept warning. Also, president of Indonesia and other premiers and heads of Southeast Asian countries against China. But as China, everybody knows, is involved in so many ways. China looks at South China Sea as market. China doesn't see Southeast Asian ASEAN countries as their family. Because despite it has very large presence in Southeast Asian countries, my friend. So that is one of the biggest issue, and how China has overlapped, how China has come across in the field of dumping goods, manufacturing cheap goods, and at the same time, what do you call that? It's a policy of BRI, depth track policy, fictional territorial claims, and divide and rule strategy. It manages government also easily. You go and see the elections of each and every country. You will find, you just investigate, you will find Chinese economy is there, Chinese conglomerate is there. They directly influence. Indo-Pacific is being redefined by China's these kinds of attitude, these kinds of policy, and which these ASEAN countries is 100% well aware. And that was the reason after 25 years of India's relationship with ASEAN countries, the heads of ASEAN countries came to India to celebrate India's relationship with ASEAN countries. And this is the reason it also gave a kind of moral support to India to come out, and that moral support from ASEAN countries today is the formation of strong Quad. And very soon you will find Quad plus ASEAN. It is in the theme, it is in the pipeline, and it is going to be realized very soon. So coming together with Indonesia, India and Indonesia, like, what do you call that? Blood-related relatives. We share the same blood as it was expressed by the first president Sukarno when he came to India during the first Republic Day of India. He said, we have the same blood. Our ancestors came from India. And apart from that, you have Hinduism, you have Buddhism. Islam came to Indonesia from Gujarati Muslims of India. So all together, and present scenario, cultural scenario, our soft power is really very, very strong. You go to any part of Indonesia, go to Jakarta, go to Sulawesi, go to Makassar, go to Kalimantan, go to any village, and say just name of Shah Rukh Khan, Salman Khan, Amitabh Bachchan, I will find a smile on their faces. So this is our strength. And soft power creates first platform for the negotiations, my dear friends. Negotiation, why should I say negotiations? Mean starting further relationship. You do not have any hesitation in doing that. So here is our strength, our India-Indonesia bilateral ties, bilateral trade is supposed to be 50 billion by 2025. I doubt we can realize, but still the goal is not unreachable. We can reach to that. We have 10.57 billion trade deficit, my dear friends. That is a very, very great pain area between India and Indonesia. I request all these think tanks to emphasize upon this, that India needs Indonesian investment. You know, apart from what we import, our 70% of coal, what we use for the power, we import from Indonesia. And my friends, the moment alternative of fossil fuel starts, like solar panel and alternative fuels, this import will be curved and slow. Then what will happen? We are importing palm oil. A majority of the palm oil we import from Indonesia now after the conflict from Malaysia. Now, I mean, continuously been tweeting your trade minister also that we should plan resiliency in the in advance. What are the other mechanisms? How we can collaborate with Indonesia through sea, through maritime resources? Indonesia is our nearest maritime countries. You see, from Andaman Nicobar to Banda Aceh, Sabang area is so near. If we can try, we can import, export, very, very fast. And why this is not happening? Particularly during Modi time, I really wonder. So possibilities is immense. We just need to step out, come out, and I'm really thankful to this Ruang International that you have organized this webinar on this particular topic. And you have to intensify this activity. Means you have to make more and more conference and include those conglomerates, those who are completely oriental in their approach. They just go to China. Now the result, I'm sorry, I'll take one more minute. The result, you go to any small market. The result is it has ruined the small and medium scale industries in Indonesia. Dear friend, you go and try to find out a leather bag in a supermarket made in Indonesia. You will not, it will be very, very difficult to find it now. At one point of time, Indonesia was, Indonesia was known exporter of leather and goods, and particularly best in quality. It is hijacked. Now go for the paint. Bandung has a very good market of paintings where you can find international paintings and paintings called Jalan Braga. And during 90s, you could find excellent paints painted by Indonesian painters. Now all these paints are replaced by Chinese paintings. It is really big shame. I'm telling you, the even small fair, the cotton toys, which is what you call that, cotton candy, it is made in China. I'm sorry to say this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And it was in a lucid manner that we went for the history of India and Indonesia relationship, how the culture has evolved, or how the religions have moved to the South Asian nation. I myself was in Singapore, and we also use this if we give money to someone else. So it's South Asia. The culture can be seen in the South Asian region in different forms and different ways, that you feel that it's not different from the South Asia. The Southeast Asian region is similar to the South Asia. So now we move forward to Mr. Dharamwan to give us his view on the topic how India and Indonesia relationship and ASEAN sovereignty can be saved.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Amrita, for the
And
time. And
I
also,
hope I took your name right.
Oh, okay. That's right. I
Um,
also hope that I mentioned your name right. All right. So thank you very much, first of all, to Eastern Interest and Ruang International for inviting me here to join the discussions on Indonesia and India bilateral cooperation in time of Indo-Pacific, which I'm very delighted to join because of a couple of reasons at least. The first is very much personal because my roommate when I was in the US was Indian and he cooked me a lot of Indian food like biryani, tikka masala. So therefore, I really like and interested India beyond only the food, of course, but also the histories and India political positions in the world geopolitics. And the second reason why I'm delighted is because of the I think India is deserves more attention in Indonesian foreign policy, considering the significant role of India not only in the Asia but in the world stage. So I think Indonesia should also more focuses on how it's created bilateral relationship and cooperations with India. So I think right for today's presentations to keep sure my 10-minute presentation. So I think I'll briefly speak on and stick on to three main points that I want to discuss it here today. The first is about the shared historical value of Indonesia and India. I'm glad that Dr. Gautam has already mentioned a very wonderful and enlightened us about the relationship, the historical relationships between India and Indonesia. Then I'll try and move on a little bit about the Indonesia and India geopolitical positions in the very fluid and dynamic geopolitical tensions in the world. And and lastly, I'm digging more on the how Indonesia and India could enhance more cooperations in maritime domain. So at first, as what Dr. Gautam was wonderfully enlightening us on the histories of Indonesia and India, I think Indonesia and India's relationships go beyond blood, like what Dr. Gautam said. It's going far beyond thousands of years, even before the period of Westerns came to Southeast Asia, before the colonization period. We shared a lot of same culture. We do share a lot of same traditions. For it could be seen here in the map on where there are a lot of Indonesian Hinduism traditionals and culture which influenced by India. For example, if I could name it here, is the Ramayana or Ramasinta, which is also have a relationship with India. And I put a big picture here on there's a very big statue of Ramayana here in Jakarta, in the main street of Jakarta, which shows that how significant was the cultures, relations between culture between India and Indonesia. And also dating back up in around 1940s, after the decolonization period, I think our founding father Jawaharlal Nehru and President Sukarno also maintained a very good relationships, which is not only important for both countries but also for Asia, Africa, and the world geopolitics by initiating one of the most important conference, I should say, in the world, which is the Bandung Conference, which initiated by President Sukarno, Jawaharlal Nehru, Nasser from Egypt, and some of the Asian leaders. They create a new geopolitical structure, a new legal order in which then inspired a lot of Asians and African countries to getting independence from their colony. So I think Indonesia and India, from their very historical view, we shared a lot of a common value of independence and sovereignty of each state, which I think it's provide a very good foundationals for the future cooperations and bilateral relationships between India and Indonesia. And also, I think India and Indonesia. India is the first largest democracy, and Indonesia is the third largest democracy. We share the same value of the importance of democracy also throughout the histories. Maybe since independence, India have always been a democratic country, if I'm not mistaken. But Indonesia, even though in the very early we have in early elections in 1950s, but however we are shift, or there is 30 years period of authoritarian regimes. But I think we are post-reform in 1998, we already changed to they go back to democracy. And so I think the relationships between the first largest democracy in the world and the third largest democracy in the world, I think could be a very good basic for further cooperations between India and Indonesia. So therefore, I'm really glad to hear what Dr. Gautam Kumar had mentioned already, how important it was, the relationships and the influence of a lot of Indonesian culture in Sumatra and Java, which came from Indian culture. And my second point is how the important the relationships between India and Indonesia in the current world geopolitics. I think for the last maybe 10 years or so, our geopolitics it's getting more and more complex. As many scholars, Professor Kishore Mahbubani, for example, from NUS, and Parakana have recently wrote a book on the future is Asia and the Asian century. A lot of analysts have predicted the 21st century would be the Asian century. So I think India and the Asian century was very much more dominated by the China and India as the two largest countries in Asia, the strongest economic in Asia. So I think, yeah, India and China was very much driven or drive the Asian century. But I think there are a lot of geopolitical interests in the regions. For example, India have, you can correct me if I'm wrong, have an Act East policy in which Southeast Asia is also becoming one of the most focus in India foreign policy. And then obviously the United States, as you might see since maybe President George W. Bush the first, who firstly initiated the Indo-Pacific outlook, in which considering Southeast Asia, China, India as a focus of a foreign policy. And then also dating back to President Obama, pivot to Asia policy, which then putting U.S. Foreign policy concern more to Asia and less on the Middle East. So I think the geopolitical struggle between China and the U.S. in the region is getting more intense with U.S. more focusing foreign policy to Asia. And of course, in other side, China has its One Belt, One Road, which then become one of the most significant geopolitical strategy in the 21st century as well, which tries to connect a lot of different countries and different countries and different interests under China project, which Indonesia is very much included, and Malaysia and most of Southeast Asian countries was very much part of the project. And it's also a controversial in the sense of to what extent the debt trap that China gave to the states. So I think it's also important geopolitical issues in the regions currently. And also, as already been discussed by Dr. Damayanti earlier, that observing the world's geopolitics, the US and China rivalry in the region, I think ASEAN should also have their own stance in terms of geopolitical stance. So we will not choose, ASEAN is always try to put the organizations in the center, in which not leaning towards the US or China, but I think ASEAN want to keep neutral. ASEAN want to having a good relationships with both China and the US. ASEAN want to make a good partner and get all the benefits from the Asia, from the US and China. So therefore, ASEAN was initiated recently last year the ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, which basically aims to put ASEAN in the center of the geopolitical discourse and get benefit from both of the countries. And lastly, I think Dr. Kumar and the previous speakers also mentioned it earlier that there is also a Quad, the US, India, Australia, and Japan strategic relationships, which well, in my sense, it put more India more on the US side rather than the China side. If you could also make it explain a bit on that, and also observing on what happened in the last several months, in which India and China is having more tense geopolitical situations in the border of Himalayan. So I think India's position as one of the biggest and most important countries in Asia and in the Asian centuries, I have choose not to remain in a very neutral between U.S. and China rivalry, and so observing all these complexities or geopolitical complexities in Asia, I think Indonesia and India should enhance more strategic role and cooperations, not only in terms of maintaining security, but also I think in terms of gaining prosperity in both of the countries. Even though I think Indonesia foreign policy will keep Indonesia neutral in terms of a military alliance between China and the US, but I think India would be a very good partner in enhancing more cooperation with ASEAN. Yeah, and I think India and Indonesia we have already have a very good relationships. President Joko Widodo was visiting New Delhi for a couple of times, and Prime Minister Modi also visited Jakarta once last year, if I'm not mistaken. And we have a lot of strategic point of cooperations between two countries. One of the which includes the investment and cooperations, as Dr. Gautam mentioned earlier, that investment between two countries was need more enhanced, and also sustainable development of marine resource, expanding cooperation in disaster risk management, fostering the tourism and cultural exchange, and also one of the most important is promoting maritime safety and security in the region. Well, observing that the Indo-Pacific is not only about a strategy at sea, or it's not only about maritime security, but it's very much broader about investment, about how to create a prosperity in the regions. But I think the nature or maritime domain would still be the center in the Indo-Pacific discourse, observing there's a lot of hotspot at sea. One of the examples in the South China Sea on how China is dominating or bullying the other ASEAN neighbor. And I think it's also very much the U.S. interest to rebalance in the South China Sea dispute. For instance, as we might observe in the last several months, I guess, Mike Pompeo, the U.S. Secretary of State, made a quite intense statement in supporting ASEAN member states to have to dare to make a strong not only statement but also act in the South China Sea, and the U.S. was very much want to back up, so to speak, ASEAN in the South China Sea. So considering the important and the strategic of maritime domain in the Indo-Pacific, I think India and Indonesia could enhance and could push more cooperations in maritime domain. As Dr. Gautam mentioned earlier, that Indonesia is India's neighbor at sea, a very much a close neighbor. Well, here in Indonesia, sometimes we never really see India as a neighbor, because we are neighbor at sea, not in the borderland as we are neighbor with Timor Leste or Malaysia or even Singapore. But if we see the Indian Oceans in a larger form, I think India is very much our neighbor at sea. Therefore, we should have enhance a lot of interest at sea. And then the second one, because Indonesia covers a vast area of which includes the Indian Oceans, the South China Sea, as part of the emerging strategic entity in the Indo-Pacific. Indeed, if I'm not mistaken, Indonesia and India still have several pending delimitations, but that's also an issue that should be enhanced. And I think, as how the moderator mentioned earlier, that Indonesia and India currently already have some strategic maritime cooperation at sea, which include the naval cooperations, including the bilateral coordinated patrols, which we have already since 2002 between Indonesian Navy and Indian Navy. And also we have a strategic partnership among Coast Guard. Last couple of years ago, in 2017, I went to India to doing a research in terms of how Coast Guard cooperations between India and Indonesia should be more enhanced. And I think our Coast Guard having a lot. We just established our Coast Guard Bakamla in 2014, very new. So therefore, we have our Coast Guard learned so much from the Indian Coast Guard at this point. So I think more bilateral cooperations in terms of maritime security and safety is very important. Also, if we see the geopolitical and the threat, as what Dr. Damayanti mentioned earlier already, we do face a lot of a common threat in Indian Oceans. There are a lot of still a piracy case, a sea armed robbery as well in the oceans. And considering that Indonesia and India shared a lot of common international trade route, so I think it is inherited in Indonesia and India national interest to having a more stronger cooperations, bilateral cooperations at sea. And also in terms of multilateral cooperation, I think Indonesia and India are already part of the IORA, Indian Rim Association organizations, which I think also important for the future foreign policy of both of the countries. So I think yeah, I keep my presentations brief because I'm the last presenter. So all of the speakers have already wonderfully mentioned their ideas uh, in the role of India and Indonesia bilateral relationships in terms of the Indo-Pacific strategy. I think that's all from me, Armita. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the brief insight into India's relationship with Indonesia and the policies we still have in place, including the maritime security policies. Now we will open the stage for a few questions from the audience. You can type in your questions in the public chat box, and we will be picking up 2 to 3 questions because we are constrained. There's a time limit and we are constrained on that. So please type in your questions. We have one question here for Dr. Gautam Kumar Ja. Do I have him? Yes. Sir, the question is, Jawaharlal Nehru always dreamt of a vibrant Asia where every country is helping each other to prosper, an Asia without divisions. So can ASEAN be the stepping stone for starting of a new Asia, a more EU type of Asia? Do you want me to repeat, sir?
Yeah, it is possible. It is possible. You see, one thing is very important. Before we assume a EU type of Asia or any big family, one has to also consider who are in your neighborhood. It's a very important point. If you see the history of India, India has never been any aggressive country. India has not seen any country with a hawkish eye. That is the essence of Indianism, and India is the strongest and one of the oldest democracies. And oldest democracies, making a journey of more than 70 years. It's not a very simple thing. It's a mature democracy, and it is a very decisive country, and it has gained trust since the years, since millennium. So India can be a very, very trusted partner in realizing what you have just said that. And it is not very difficult. As I said that you see one thing is very important. Why China has, apart from what it has done into South China Sea, why it had not done to other smaller states in South Asia like it has done to Tibet? Because it was scared that it will make a very domino impact to Southeast Asian countries, and all these Southeast Asian countries will unite against China. So it was keeping its stone one by one. So that's what, and that aspirations, as I have already shared, that these things is only possible when the entire atmosphere is hygiene and balanced. Hygiene means what? You see some of the countries in Southeast Asia and ASEAN countries say, okay, it is happening in South China Sea. But it doesn't understand the same South China Sea water is also your water. How China has basically, what do you call that? It has ruined the ecosystem of South China Sea. It has ruined all these coral reefs where all the seaweeds and sea animals and sea organism goes and breed. And that coral reefs in South China Sea are very important for the geological point of view, or for biological marine resources point of view. And they see, okay, it is happening in South China Sea, or 3 or 4 countries are important. And that is very much, cleared when the first uh, arbitration won by Philippines against China. Only Vietnam rose and say, okay, not the Vietnamese government. You see the social media, then social media. All the social medias were echoing Philippines. I'm not talking Philippines before Duterte's government. Echoing. Other countries were keeping silent. Okay, fine, okay. And the justice will rule over, justice will rule over. So this is what we need. आज के समय में, in today's world, we need consensus. And that consensus has to come today or tomorrow. Thank you. I think I have answered partly, if I understood your question well.
Thank you so much, sir. Now the next question we have is for Dr. Pankaj Jha. The question is, when we talk about Indo-Pacific, the centrality of ASEAN is obvious, and as India and all the Quad countries emphasize on the ASEAN centrality too, then can we expect a closer relationship between India and Indonesia translating in bringing Quad and ASEAN together? Do we have Dr. Pankaj?
Yeah. Thank you. I take your question in a different way. You said that the ASEAN centrality is obvious. In international politics, you don't take things for granted. Why I am making this point is because when ASEAN was still existent, APEC came into form. APEC is Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, bringing two different divergent regions together, Asia and Pacific together. But the agenda was primarily economic. Now the thing is that given the fact that it has outlined it wants an economic pursuit cooperation, and 6 of the ASEAN countries also joined by default. But let's assume there is another forum which comes into being, which is known as an Indo-Pacific Cooperation, or somebody which comes into being and which is formalized. And there are a number of partners and players into it, including your dialogue partners. Now, in that case, ASEAN will not be sitting at the central table. And there is no compulsion of the dialogue partners to give or anoint ASEAN centrality as, okay, this is the formative structure, because there are major powers which are involved into it. Now the gravitational pull, geopolitical gravitational pull doesn't remain, even if it's an EU or ASEAN, doesn't remain with organization. It automatically, by the power structure, configures to the biggest power which is there. And you can see that in the case of Security Council P5, which caused the shots, and subsequent all other things. So the thing is that whether ASEAN can take new ideas, whether it can say that, look, I'm central to the structure because I have a decision-making body, I can take decisions which are acceptable to all. Until and unless ASEAN doesn't acclimatize, I use the word acclimatize to the changing circumstances, just don't take ASEAN centrality as given. Again, the second aspect, till East Asia Summit is informal structure, you are assured that you are central to the whole architecture. If East Asia Summit comes into being as a formal structure, then your centrality will be under duress. Thank you very much. And with regard to this question of whether India and Indonesia translate in bringing Quad and ASEAN together, it depends on what kind of a commitment India makes and whether Indonesia will be counted as a Quad plus country in near future. That will decide how the future holds for both the countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We have another question for okay, we have another question. This can be taken by any of the panelists, Miss Angel or Mr. I'm so sorry.
Darmawan.
Darmawan. I'm so sorry for that. How the ASEAN Way Principle make impact for the ASEAN-India relations, especially in political security issues in Indo-Pacific?
Okay, I don't know. Are you still, you want to answer first, or you just give me first?
You go ahead, Bu. I'll go after
Okay.
you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for the question. It's quite interesting. I mean, um, in many conferences, many students or some participants ask me about these ASEAN Way principles, and then how these principles can, be adjusted to a lot of, interests of many countries. So first of all, I would like to mention that ASEAN has like 6 principles or ASEAN Way principles. The first one is the mutual respect from all the member states and the partners of ASEAN, and then free from external interference, which is, actually focus on the sovereignty and, the political territory on the ASEAN member state itself, and then non-interference principles, and then peaceful conflict resolution, and the last one is the effective cooperation. So, well, to some extent, yes, these principles, a lot of people or a lot of students will ask about the non-interference principle, because this kind like conflicting with many others, the interests or the goals or the aims of ASEAN itself, where we want to be more in collaboration or more in cooperative in many ways. Then somehow it seems like we are willing to give some kind of, have some kind of, how to say it, adjustment to gain like adjustment of interest, or harmony of the interest. So somehow we need to compromise, not compromise, I'm saying like, well, remember when I said about this Geoffrey Thiel, the modern and postmodern states? Modern states will focus more on the realism perspective, which focus on the sovereignty and political integrity, political territory, while the postmodern state focus more on the collaborative way on facing or dealing with common or common threat like terrorism, or more on the degradation of environment issues, or many other non-traditional threats. So what I'm trying to say that as long as these ASEAN countries still have the realist or the modern perspective, focusing on the non-interference principles, yes, it can be difficult for many countries or the partnership of ASEAN to go to further cooperation, because it seems like um, every country still focus on the national interest. But once we move forward to the post-modern state, focus more on the regional cooperation, focus on the international interest, and then focus more on the common interest. So this non-interference, somehow we have to, to become, how to say, to, well, it actually, it is need to be adjusted, because it can be a hindrance if we move forward to the postmodern state, postmodern perspective. So yes, to some extent, this principle, the non-interference principles, can be a hindrance for ASEAN countries itself, and then with its partnership. But the rest, it's very good. I mean, like peaceful conflict resolution, the effective cooperation principles. I think there are no problem with that. Only the non-interference principles. But of course, we also have to respect some of the member states of ASEAN, for example, Myanmar or many other states that still focus on this sovereignty as something that they have to protect, they have to promote. And then ASEAN, with its principle, of course, they have to, to respect these sovereignty issues between the member states itself. So yeah, I think maybe Aristio can explore more about this issue, the non-interference. Thank you. I will answer later for Mas Bhakti. I will, after Aristio will answer it.
Yeah. Miss
I
Angel,
think I think I only want to add a little bit on these questions. First, I don't really think that the Asian principles would become a barrier or supporter on the ASEAN-India bilateral relationships. Indeed, maybe if we put a squeeze on the Asian way, we could argue it is a deliberations and consensus and also non-interference principles. And if we see the non-interference principles, I think it's not only the Asian. Well, it's Asian emphasize the non-interference principles, but it's very much the principles that recognize in international law. It's recognized within all states that interference should not be done in terms of relations among nations. But in regards to the deliberation and consensus, and I think also ASEAN, it's very difficult to say uh, uh, should ASEAN, like as a whole, as an organization, create a stronger relationship with any country? Because I think it's more also domestic politics and domestic foreign policy interests of each Asian member state, I think, play more important role. I think, for example, how Indonesia perceives India in Indonesian foreign policy, or how Singapore, how Philippines perceive India in their domestic foreign policy concern. I think very much playing more important role in ensuring how ASEAN and India could enhance more cooperation in the internal foreign policy. So I don't think that an ASEAN way as a principles could be barrier or supporter to enhance more ASEAN-India bilateral relationships because in my point, I think it's more depends on each member state's foreign policy rather than the ASEAN as an organization. That's I think my take on the issue.
thank you so much for your answers. As we are running short on time, we won't be
Okay.
able to take more questions. Ms. Angel, I can request you to answer the
Yeah.
last question in the chat box if possible.
Yes, yes, just 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes. Thank you, Mas Bhakti. About this, how solid is ASEAN member countries in relation in dealing with China? As we know that for the first time in 2012, ASEAN has a split decision regarding the issue of China. If I'm not mistaken, at that time, the host of the summit is Laos, and Laos refused the question of refused the proposal from, if I'm not mistaken, from Vietnam or from Malaysia to bring the issue of South China Sea to become the agenda of their, agenda of the summit. But then Laos, the host, as the host, refused that, and it is the first time ASEAN's countries split in the conference, and they resulted in some kind of tension at that time, and then until now the code of conduct in South China Sea is still on progress, and China said like, hey, the problem is not not me, but the ASEAN countries itself has to come to one voice or one solution decision how to have kind of deal with China. So yes, you are right that it's kind of like, it can be a barrier, it can be a hindrance between, among the ASEAN member state itself when dealing with China. So, but again, because of the principle of non-interference, Indonesia cannot persuade Vietnam or Malaysia or Cambodia or Laos to be, as one voice, and it is the challenge, it is the threat for ASEAN itself when dealing with China or the US, like we just discussed before. So, I think what we can say that as long as we have some kind of cooperation, not in a high level like military or the political issue, but more on the research, for example, or maritime exploration, or the the tourism cooperation. So then ASEAN countries will have more unity in dealing with China or many other countries. So my suggestion for ASEAN is they have to avoid to refuse the high level issues like political or the security or maritime security or the overlapping South China Sea conflict. So try to reduce that issue and then come to, you know, more on the marine research cooperation, or how to improve the tourism, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that can be one of the, you know, strategy to make some kind of unity in the ASEAN. Then ASEAN can be, you know, as a central of you know, the Indo-Pacific connectivity. I think that's all, Amrita. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Angel. Thank you to all the panelists for giving their valuable sharing that valuable information with us. It took us from the history to present to what we can expect in the future. How can ASEAN, Indo-Pacific can work, how Quad and Quad Plus is going to come in. It was a very insightful talk. Thank you to all the panelists for that. And now I would like to hand over the stage to Mona for the next session. And I would like to apologize for all the fuss that has been in this session, because my office room has turned out to be my 6-month-old playroom. So I'm still struggling with things out there. All the best. And Mona, all over to you.
Thank you, Amrita ma'am. And I would like to thank everybody for sharing the insightful views. I mean, it was such a grateful, it was such a informative session, if I might say. I mean, from taking note of all the perspectives that everyone has added. I mean, it has surely added to my, saved in my brain. I mean, it might have helped everybody who's listening or is a part of this panel. So I would like to thank you everybody for joining this first session. Now I would like to, hand over the hosting from me to the from the host of Ruang International. I would like to say, I mean, Jianli, I think you should go on preparing for the second session. Is Jianli with us right now? Jianli.
Okay. Thank you, Mona. Maybe we have Inda to lead us in the next session.
Yes, thank you.
Maybe Inda can take the.
Yeah. I think first of all, thanks to all speakers and moderator for enlightening us with all the knowledge. Thank you so much, Dr. Gautam Ja, Dr. Pankaj, ma'am, Amrita ma'am, Angel ma'am, and then Aristio sir too. So thank you so much once again for enlightening us with your presence. And now we would like to proceed to the second session. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, organizers and my co-participants, co-panelists. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll meet again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for Eastern Interest and Ruang International and all speakers and participants.
It was nice meeting with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, stay happy and healthy.
Thank you.
God bless.
Okay, thank you to Mona and all the speakers in the first panel. Now we are going to enter the second panel of this webinar. I hope everyone here is still excited about taking this webinar to the end. And the subtheme of this panel is India-ASEAN relation in the post-COVID world. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Indah Septika. I'm a Director of Administration and Finance Department of Ruang Internasional. Now I will serve as your Master of Ceremony in this panel. So before we start this webinar, please welcoming opening remarks from Janli Emmanuel as a founder and executive director from Ruang Internasional. Mr. Janli, time is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Inda, for this opportunity. Okay. Good evening, everyone. How are you, everyone? I hope you are staying healthy and happiness. So, first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Jian Limal Bagensa as the founder and executive director of Ruang International, to welcoming the second panel session in the Indo-Pacific regional webinar. I would like to say thanks to all parties who have jointly supported this activity. First, to our colleagues from Eastern Interest from India who have entrusted us the Ruang International in Indonesia to collaborate and work together for this extraordinary activity. Second, to colleges from the Ruang International team who have also participated together in preparing and supporting this event. And the third, to the moderator and the fellow speakers from master's students and master's degree from both India and Indonesia. And finally, to all invitees and webinar participants who have attended in this evening. On this occasion, we would like to state that the Ruang International has continued to contribute to the youth empowerment process in Indonesia. We are always open to collaborating with activities on a local, national, regional, and international level. We always believe in the need for this space and opportunity for young people from all walks of life to be able to build and improve their abilities and capabilities according to their respective backgrounds. No stupid youth, no incompetent youth, no youth who are not creative. The question is, to what extent have we facilitated the needs of this youth? Through activity like this, we believe in addition to adding new insights and knowledge to all participants. This activity also opens the wildest possible opportunity for young people to appear and go to the stage, not only as audience. Hopefully, this activity, this webinar will also further strengthen the good relations between Indonesia and India through the approach of youth activities, as well as increased network and global connectivity, which is, of course, very useful for all of us who live in the era of globalization and digitalization. Finally, I congratulate for your participating in the second panel session of Indo-Pacific Regional Webinar, which was held and presented directly by Eastern Interest from India and Ruang International from Indonesia. To all of you guys, thank you and God bless you all.
Thank you for Mr. Janli Manuel, such a great opening remarks. Now, is it now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker? Please join me in welcoming an Honorable Mr. Mohit Kumar, is ASEAN student, University of Delhi. The second is Muhammad Rizal Sanun, founder Diplomacy Talk, Master Student in Diplomacy and International Policy, Paramadina University. The third is Miss Kavita Sewada, specialization in international relations, JNU, New Delhi. And the last but not least, Honorable Mr. Daniel Ariel Diritiau, ASEAN Indonesia Youth Ambassador Master Students in International Relations, Universitas Parayangan, Bandung. And this panel will be led by Elia Dameria NSK as our moderator for the second panel. She is an international relations student of Universitas Kristen Indonesia, and she is also a Duta Bahasa Jakarta, Indonesia. And in 2019, she has an achievement as an outstanding student of Universitas Kristen Indonesia. So please welcoming our moderator, Miss Elia. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much for Miss Indah as the Master of Ceremony for welcoming me in the second panel discussion of our webinar today. So before we begin, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Elia Dameria NSK as the moderator of the second panel discussion of the Indo-Pacific Regional Webinar today with the topic ASEAN-India Relations in the Post-COVID World. Before we move on to the main session, I would like to deliver some rules in order to avoid any disturbance during the presentations later on. So first, I would like to ask you to minimize the possible noises around your surrounding, and also for all the participants to remain silent or mute until we open the Q&A session. And maybe Miss Indah can help me with the participant that wants to ask questions in the Q&A session. And if you have a question after that, you can click the raise hand option after clicking the ellipsis button. So before I begin to briefly read about the achievements of our panelists today, I would like to give introductory or opening remarks as a moderator. So we know that India relations with ASEAN has emerged as a key cornerstone of both ASEAN and India foreign policy. The relationship has evolved from the Look East policy enunciated in early 1990s, which led India to become a sectoral partner of ASEAN in 1992, a dialogue partner in 1996, and a summit-level partner in 2002. The upgradation of this partnership to strategic partnership during the celebration of the 20th anniversary commemorative summit at New Delhi in 2012 was actually a natural corollary to the growth of the India and ASEAN relations. The India-ASEAN strategic partnership acquired a new momentum with the announcement of the Act East policy. In the 12th summit in 2014, it is conveyed a clear intent on the part of India to upscaling its engagement with the ASEAN member states. The Act East policy emphasized connectivity, commerce, and culture at the focus area of action for a greater ASEAN and India integration. Yet, from demographic side consideration, looking at the fact that India is still second largest population in the world and the fact that the combined total population of the member states within ASEAN will rank just below India with a total population of more than 620 million will add both more plus and minus to the consideration of the relations between the two subjects. Especially as we know that due to this pandemic COVID-19, whereas mobility and face-to-face meeting and job is obstructed and makes it impossible to actually have a full working and diverse economic activity from health, we may say that it is considered as a noble act to prevent the spread of the virus. In fact, some countries, including Indonesia, it becomes a mandatory to limiting the movement in the working area. We can see that both the labor and the employee agree from the health side that it becomes a mandatory to limiting the movement in the working area. Plus, seeing that the two regions are also an area for the geopolitical battles and fighters in the global economy add questions to the future of relations between the two parties, namely ASEAN and India after the COVID-19 pandemic. So, considering all those things, are these two parties will still able to maintain a good relationship afterwards? The paradox of having a lot of human populations, human resources with a growing economic in this pandemic area will add more dilemma of the cooperation between ASEAN and India. Will the integration of the economic between them remain stable or will it be shaken with this pandemic? And what will happen afterward? Ere we begin, I'm going to briefly read and invite our panelists today. First, we have Mr. Mohit Kumar. Before I invite Mr. Mohit Kumar to join us and present his presentation, I would like to read some of his briefly achievements and professional experiences. Mr. Mohit Kumar got his master's degree in East Asian Studies from University of Delhi. He also used to work as an India quarterly intern at the Indian Council of World Affairs, New Delhi. Mr. Mohit Kumar also has expertise in multilingual skills in Hindi, French, and English, and a beginner level in Spanish and Japanese. So, Mr. Mohit Kumar, the time and place is yours.
Thank you, Elia, for introducing me. And first of all, I would like to thank Eastern Interest and Ruang International. You guys are doing a great job, as a youth organization, to conduct these kind of webinars, which is very fruitful, for the upcoming scholars having this area of interest, especially Indo-Pacific region. So I would like to thank you and congratulate you. So I would like to begin, to touch upon the theme we are discussing today, India-ASEAN relationships, the prospects and, the challenges, what can be the challenges and what can be the future order in terms of the relationship between these two, stalwarts of Asia, I would say, in the post-COVID world. So let us begin by discussing the Southeast Asian region, first of all, because it is a very complex and diverse region. And you can get the majority of the world's culture and civilization there. So it's a very complex region, and the Indo-Asean Connect actually started in the early 1990s, as Elia also mentioned in the brief. Basically, now what we are witnessing is a strategic partnership, and which is very instrumental to modern times. Before it was a fully sectoral dialogue partnership. Now it is more of a strategic partnership, which is allowing both of the parties to take a leadership role in the Indo-Pacific region, uh, seeing what China is doing actually in contrast. So it is a very important step in the relationship history, if we see. And in terms of the foreign policy, India always keeps ASEAN as a central key pillar, um, based on its action and dynamic oriented Act East foreign policy. So it was look east and now it is Act East, not only in words, but I think also in actions. As we have already seen that the second term of our Prime Minister began with greater dynamism towards our neighboring countries, India's neighboring countries, and the kind of outreach India has made to the neighboring countries under the neighborhood first policy and also the Act East policy is very instrumental in this case. Now, to sum up in nutshell, we have already crossed 25 years of dialogue partnership and over 5 years of strategic partnership. So now we are entering in the age of consolidating it to a further level. In terms of, I would like to divide my talk in terms of political security, economy, and cultural connections. So let's talk about economic partnership. The Indo-ASEAN economic partnership is basically majorly driven by the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, CECA. So, which is the nucleus and nexus of this economic partnership. And in terms of imports and exports, I would say that India is still under unfavorable, balance of trade when it is compared with ASEAN nations. Our imports are way higher than our exports, but now the things have started changing because Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore have emerged as export hubs basically for Indian goods. So the things can start changing very quickly. Also, like one more thing, that the investment flows and the trade links between India and ASEAN have been facilitated purely because of India ASEAN free trade area in the 2010s, which was completed. And also the Indo-ASEAN agreement of trade, services, and investment. So that was also a very significant turn in the economic partnership. Coming to political security cooperation, I would say that this is purely to deal with traditional and non-traditional security challenges. Particularly now in COVID era, it is our non-traditional security challenge, rather. So, in terms of regional initiatives and participating in forums, India takes active participation in Asia Regional Forum, which is our main forum for security dialogue, and also ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, which is the highest consultative and cooperative mechanism in ASEAN body. And also the East Asia summits and the ASEAN-India separate meetings are, an example that shows the continuous commitment of India towards its ASEAN members. So that is something which is very much continuous and relevant in our foreign policy. Coming to the socio-cultural cooperation, that is also a very important facet of our relationship, because our recently our foreign minister Dr. Jaishankar also reiterated this the importance of think tanks in Indo-Asean relationship. So we can see that we have special training courses for ASEAN diplomats, and also we have Asean-India network of think tanks. Plus, now to foster educational ties, we have Asean-India network of universities, which is being talked about. So that is something very much prominent, which is about to come. And particularly, I would like to touch upon the think tank facet, because it is very much instrumental in filling the knowledge gap and providing policy recommendations for our country's foreign policy in context of ASEAN members. So that is about socio-cultural cooperation. Now let's come to I would say the priority area, which is there in terms of Indo-ASEAN relationship, that is the connectivity sphere. So we have already seen that India has gained momentum in terms of completing its projects which are in the pipeline, mainly the India-Myanmar-Thailand trilateral highway, which is a infrastructure and connectivity project, and in terms of water connectivity, Kaladan multimodal transport project connecting Kolkata seaport to Situate. So these are still in the pipeline, but we have gained momentum in terms of completing this. I would like to keep this here only, and I would discuss its further challenges in the challenges part. So, and also talking about maritime and air connectivity, it has been gaining momentum, but it is not yet under, it has not yet reached its full potential. So we have to wait and see in that perspective. Also, there have been talks that Indo-Myanmar Thailand trilateral highway is being vouched for extended till Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. So for a greater outreach. So it is under discussion. It is not yet, decided. So, and in terms of Indo-ASEAN financial assistance, I would like to touch upon the funds which India, provides to ASEAN members. Indo-ASEAN Cooperation Fund is there, around $50 million of assistance, mainly for capacity building in terms of political, cultural, and economic spheres between the two, Indo-ASEAN. And Indo-ASEAN Science and Technology Development Fund for joint research and development projects. Third is the Green Fund, which supports collaboration efforts in climate change and activities related to environment. So these are the kind of financial assistance which is there between Indo and ASEAN nations. And now let's talk about the prominence of the two, India and ASEAN members in the post-COVID world. Why India needs ASEAN? I would like to talk about from Indian point of view. So India needs a close diplomatic relationship with ASEAN members purely for its economic and security reasons. And it is very prominent that if our connectivity with ASEAN members nations, when it will increase, it will it will automatically give a clear signal to China that we are also growing, our reach in the region, because China is already there with its BRI, and we are not yet there. But our connectivity is very important. Our connectivity projects are very important to act as a counterweight to China. And particularly in this connectivity point, I would like to say that Northeast India is at the center. It is at the heart of the connectivity projects. So it is a win-win for both, because Northeast India will get its economic development, and also it will check on Northeast insurgency terrorist activities. It will be also under control. So So these are some positive points for India, particularly Northeast India, because their development is also in the hands of the connectivity projects with ASEAN nations. So these are some points. And also ASEAN, occupies a centralized position in the Indo-Pacific rule-based security architecture, according to India, because ASEAN and India both support free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific rule-based region. So, and seeing the kind of presence of China there, it is highly important that Indo-ASEAN have a collaboration. Not just the Quad, Indo-ASEAN also needs to step up its game to further check China. And besides Indo-Pacific, I think in South China Sea also, there needs to be a maritime connectivity or a maritime cooperation between Indo-ASEAN nations, purely because 40%, around 40% of the trade of India is dependent on the region. And so it is a very significant amount, around 40%. I'm not sure about the exact figure, but around 40%. So, and also maritime connectivity will not just serve the purpose of securing the choke points, but it will also provide for cheaper logistics and increased trade of goods and services. So these are some points there. And in terms of economic challenges, now let's come to challenges. As I already talked about the unfavorable balance of trade between India and ASEAN. Now, also we have seen that India has pulled out of regional comprehensive economic partnership deal. So that was to purely avoid the further deepening of trade deficit with China and also with ASEAN nations. So India, what India needs to do, I'm going to talk about from the Indian point of view, that India needs to go towards the domestic economic growth. We have seen the self-reliant initiative recently launched. So I would say that according to my understanding, it will India needs to check on its labor and land laws to further provide for ease of doing business, and also like further assistance to MSMEs, micro and small enterprises. So that are some points that India needs to check when it comes to domestic economic growth. So then only we can see that we have the potential to overturn this unfavorable trade balance of trade with ASEAN countries. And as I already told, I would like to reiterate that Singapore, Thailand have emerged as a export destinations for India, for Indian goods. So that can also take and consolidate our economic relations in that aspect. Now let's look at the way forward. So as I already told you that maritime connectivity is a must to realize the full potential of Indo-ASEAN trade. Furthermore, you can say that that India perceives ASEAN, but what about the ASEAN nations? And it is very positive for India that ASEAN nations also look at India from as a perspective that India can also check on China. India can also act as a counter balance to China. So they also have trust on us. It is not only our foreign policies, giving them importance. It is to and fro. It is quid pro quo actually. So it is mutually supportive and beneficial when it comes to India and ASEAN nations. And also India is looked at taking a greater role in economic integration in Indo-Pacific region. So that is also a very positive sign for India. But the one thing that needs improvement is the air connectivity. Air connectivity links needs to improve to foster business and tourism ties. So these are some issues. And now way forward I have already discussed. Now I would like to conclude because I think I have only 1 minute left. So we have already seen that we have convergence and respect towards common principles when it comes to Indo-Pacific region. So we just need to carry this forward. And with regard to Indonesia, I would like to say we are doing our bit, and both the countries are working on digital connectivity. We have already passed 70 years of comprehensive strategic partnership, so that is a very significant turn of events there. And also I would like to say, in regards to Thailand, we are it is part of our Act East policy, but in terms of Thailand, we are part of their Act West policy, so West Look policy, sorry. So these are some complementaries in terms of bilateral interactions. And just as Elia mentioned in the brief, Indo-Asean strategic engagement is based on 3 C's: connectivity, culture, and your commerce. So I think it will it will be prosperous when it comes to Indo and ASEAN nations in the Indo-Pacific region, purely because India is also rising above the middle power status in the region, and now it is taking a key player role with regards to ASEAN also, and with regards to its own individual presence. So I would like to conclude there. And with regard to final concluding remarks, I would tell it later. Thank you so much, Elia. I would like to hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much for Mr. Kumar for the insightful presentation. Second, we have Mr. Muhammad Rizal Sainun. Mr. Muhammad Rizal Sainun is a young professional with many experiences in public relations, communications, and project management. He also has involved in numerous both national and international projects across ASEAN region. Mr. Muhammad Rizal is also a co-founder of Diplomacy Talk and currently pursuing his master's degree in International Relations and Diplomacy from Paramadina Graduate School of Diplomacy, Paramadina University. So, Mr. Muhammad Rizal Sainun, the time and place is yours.
Thank you very much, Aliyah. I think I sent my presentations PPT to one of the committee here. Maybe they can share the screen to see my presentation so anybody can see what I would like to deliver in this respective forum.
Okay, wait a moment.
Maybe Bang Jianli can help with the PPT.
Yep, sure. Wait.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's like waiting for the PPT. I congratulate Ruang International and Eastern Interest to invite me as a part of the panel speaker for this respective forum to talk about ASEAN and Indian relation, present, past, or even post COVID-19. I think like these two respective regions are very important for our future cooperations and also our political dimension within the region itself, because these two respective region have a very wider cooperation in terms of politics, economy, and also security itself. Okay, in this forum, I would like to narrow my point of view into a specific deliver lecture today. It's talk about identifying political impact of ASEAN and India response to COVID-19. Next slide, please. Okay, I think in order to make us understand about what we are going to discuss later on about my part, I would like to have an outline of the discussion today with the introduction, historical institutionalism approach to the response of ASEAN and India to the COVID-19. And the next, I would like to talk about ASEAN-India mitigating the impact of the pandemic. And I would like to share about regional political impact and trends as a result of the pandemic, the challenge for the future cooperation and opportunities for the two regions cooperation after pandemic. Next slide. Okay, here I would like to bring on the table, talk about the current situation in the global scale. If you take a look at the data derived from World Health Organization, we can see that there are 42 million confirmed cases up to this day and 1.2 million deaths for the COVID-19. And if we try to move a little bit to what the data given by WHO about coronavirus disease dashboard, we can see that India is one of the countries that become one of the biggest growing number of cases in the world after the United States, with the total number of growing cases is 7.8 million and still growing up to this day. And then let's move around to what we can see from Southeast Asia in general. We can see that Southeast Asia has the same problem as India. We have 8.8 million cases of coronavirus pandemic. And it become one of the most critical and important topic across the globe to talk about the impact of this pandemic through the whole world. So the world is experiencing an unprecedented health crisis due to the coronavirus pandemic. ASEAN and India have been badly affected in terms of both human health and economic condition. ASEAN and India in various capacity have undertaken, if you see the different measure and show preparation to tackle the present challenge. They try to increase testing, tracking, and treating as the main objective in order to tackle the problem in these two respective regions. In the other hand, in the first time when the pandemic hit these two regions, they tried to impose the strict lockdown. If you take a look what happened in ASEAN perspective on handling this kind of the pandemic, we have a different dimension in terms of approach in order to handle in the level of the government, especially in the ASEAN region. And also, it also different with what Indian government did to their own respective region. So if we take a look, the north part of Southeast Asia, in the period of the first time the COVID-19 entered the Southeast Asia, they did a different measurement in order to tackle the problem by do a strict lockdown for their own country, and also they banned the travel, and other hand, they try to impose strict travel restriction and a ban on all mass gathering. Like country like Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Laos PDR, Myanmar, and Vietnam, they try to minimize the gathering within their country in order to tackle down the problem. The same thing happened with Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and the Philippines did the same thing in order to tackle down the problem. On the other hand, some countries have been struggling to cope up with the coronavirus outbreak due to the lack of resources. This is the most important part that we need to talk more about, the lack of resources between the two regions. Because if we take a look economically, we can see that there is a disparity in terms of economic between Indonesia, Malaysia, and other ASEAN countries comparing to the others. So it also impacted to their effort combating this pandemic as well. So this region cannot do a general and strict restriction that they made into the table because they have a different level of approaching in terms of their government level. In the other hand, when we try to see what happened in the region between these two important partnerships, India, on the other hand, has initiated several measures to control the spread, including extended lockdown for more than 3 months, and then impose travel restriction, both domestic and international, plus public places like gym, theaters, shopping mall, restaurant, and education institution even. And has banned mass gathering, and at the same time has facilitated to remote work and businesses with help of the digital technology itself. Next. Okay, so in dealing with this pandemic, we have to see from the ASEAN perspective how ASEAN and India relation. It is a relation between regionalism. I mean, like a couple of state. I mean, a number of states who are integrated into ASEAN, and they make a regional body, and their relation with India as one of the strategic partnership. If we take a look for the historical institutionalism approach, illustrate three main things that are deepened regarding ASEAN cooperation. First, norms and practice of ASEAN cooperation develop and always respond to changing structure in the world of politics. So if we can say that ASEAN is very flexible organization in the region, they try to do, adaptation with the current situation, what happened with the current situation. So they try to understand, observe, and also mitigating their own plan in order to secure the position of their membership, in order to be able to be stable in the region, in order to respond to the political hegemony in the region itself, before the pandemic, during the pandemic, or even post the pandemic itself. So second is there is a path dependence where past cooperation pattern will influence current policy. So talking about the action made by ASEAN in order to handle those kind of problem within the region, they always reflect back to their history, how successful history was to tackle the problem. So, and then the third is continuities and change, our past cooperation pattern influence current policy. So the past action will always be a measurement for ASEAN in order to do action through the next challenge that they would face in the future. So if you take a look, the experience of ASEAN in order to dealing with the pandemic, it's all about how ASEAN created a fourth ASEAN summit on AIDS prevention in 1992 in Singapore, and they tried to build such a very good communication for to gain the multi-perspective from the region in order to tackle down AIDS in the region. And also the same effort as well tried to do in SARS pandemic at the moment. They do a SARS meeting in Bangkok in 2003. And then next is 2010 through ASEAN's post-2015 development agenda on integration with sustainable development goals. Next. Okay. Here is ASEAN and India mitigating impact of the pandemic. So if you take a look at currently India and ASEAN are really hard to try in order to tackle down the problem, especially the growing number of cases within their respective region. India did a lot of effort in order to do communication with other international stakeholders. ASEAN did also communication and consultancy with other successful regions that already tackled down the problems, such as the European Union or other standing partners such as New Zealand, Australia, and surrounding partners that can be the source of consultancy for ASEAN and also India to get out from this outbreak. If you take a look at what they have done so far is all about during the last 4 months, ASEAN and its member state and they did a dialogue partner have issued statement to jointly fight the COVID-19 pandemic. And then after that, they do a proactive action in order to do ASEAN, China, Japan, and Republic of Korea held the special ASEAN +3 APP summit on coronavirus disease through video conference on April 2020. And they also did, they also have a result called ASEAN Summit +3 joint statement. And Indian Prime Minister in the other side participated in the extraordinary virtual G20 Leaders Summit convened on 26 March 2020 to discuss challenge posed by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic and to forge a global coordinated response. This action did by the Prime Minister in order to get a brief consultancy and exchange how to tackle the problem with G20 countries in order to serve a better condition in India right now, since India right now is the second country that affected the most. And then Indian Prime Minister also discussed with the leaders of Indonesia, Myanmar, Thailand, Singapore, and Vietnam through telephonic conversations, shared concern over the pandemic with assurance to extend support to ASEAN member states. But in the other hand, we should questioning collaboration action between India and ASEAN. Why I say it so? Because in the midst of fighting a highly infection disease that transcend regional boundaries and across the globe, both partners have conveyed their intention to fight the pandemic at various fora. However, there has been no joint statement or special announcement by India and ASEAN to address the COVID-19 pandemic. This is really a critical situation where they already discussed something that really important for the two respective regions, but they don't have joint statement in order to strengthen their cooperation in terms of handling and tackling the problem pandemic within the region. And then India ASEAN countries tend to have divergent interests and priorities. Each member face their own unique socio-economic and political challenges. Of course, if we take a look at the experience of ASEAN country handling the pandemic, each country, they have no single standard for their collaboration to tackle the problem because they have a different and disparity in terms of economy, and they have a unique culture and culture, unique social culture, and also different in terms of political and government segment within the country. And the other hand, ASEAN is not free from internal and external security challenges either. Within the region, there are border dispute conflict, illegal migration, ethnic group, and other issues that surrounding ASEAN. And it could, in fact, the future and also their integration in terms of handling the pandemic. So ASEAN is totally different with the European Union because their non-intervene principle that allow them in order to tackle the problem within their respective home. Next. So this is, I think, the main point that I will deliver for my lecture today is impact and political consequences in responding to a pandemic. So through this kind of, experience handling the pandemic with a different layer and approach for the government level, and also different approach within the region, both ASEAN and India. There is also a trend in political dimension in both respective regions. The first is all about the government failure. The government failure, this is something that always be one of the most critical in our time during the pandemic. This is important to discuss, but I would like to give a brief understanding, and we will continue to discuss this kind of political trend during the pandemic. So the first is the country, the state in many countries, the government in many countries fail to give and provide healthcare, education, and also a great law system to their own community. And this has become a critical thing not only in one particular region, but also currently we face a very massive protest from different parts of ASEAN country, or even in India as well. They protest the government because the government couldn't guarantee the healthcare system for them and to provide a better healthcare system to get out from the outbreak itself. So big role of the military, the rise of protests coming from the people, civic society, penetrate the government to take the military action in order to cut these protests. For example, we can see the experience in Indonesia, how Indonesia used security personnel in order to tackle the massive protesting from all across the region. What happened in the Philippines as well, they did the same in Thailand as well. Authoritarianism. So the rise of pandemic also reflect, makes the government to be, anti-protest, anti-protest. Why I say so? Some of the countries in these two respective regions become currently become more authoritarianism in terms of their policy that they apply for their own respected home. What happened in Philippines, what happened in Indonesia, in Thailand, and in India as well, it become one of the most important cases that we need to pay attention. Inequality, of course, there is an equality not only in the region, but also in India as well. We will discuss it later on. And polarization and political identity emerged since the COVID-19 because each people, each group have a different intention in order to bring their own perception into the public with a different goal and understanding within the society. Next. Next. Okay. So according to this discussion, I will say that even we face a lot of political, economic, and security challenges within the region, that the future should always be possible for the cooperation within the region in the post-COVID-19. So Indonesia and ASEAN can work, ASEAN and India, can work together to enhance preparedness and capacity in responding to communicable and emerging infection diseases, including pandemic and other potential public health and biological threats. Preparing, planning, prevention efforts, and capacity building would include, among others, the strengthening of area on surveillance, laboratory networking, human resources capacity, and information networking, work towards developing affordable quality medicine and traditional medicine that is accessible to the people, and explore the development of a framework for cooperation in these areas as appropriate, promoting sharing of information, exchange of experts in the field of public health, medicine, health education, and promotion. ASEAN, India, and India should regular consultation between ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management and India's National Disaster Management Authority to facilitate synergy among multilateral cooperation mechanism and disaster management. So this is the end of my presentation. I hope that all the knowledge I give to all of you can be useful, and I'm really open for the discussion of this topic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Muhammad Rizal Sainun, for the fruitful explanations. If Mr. Mohit Kumar explained very well the challenges that might occur between the ASEAN and India due to this pandemic, Mr. Rizal Sainun explained very well that what should the both parties do in the future to mitigate and to counter the effect of the pandemic. So thank you, Mr. Muhammad Rizal Sainon, for the wonderful presentations. Now we'll have our lady speaker, Ms. Kavita Seuda. Ms. Kavita Seuda is pursuing her master degrees in politics, specialization in international studies from School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and her area of expertise is in Indian economic and security policies with special attention on China and ASEAN countries. She is also very fluent in Hindi and English language. So Ms. Kavita Seuda, the time and the place is yours.
Thank you, Alia. Am I audible?
No, please go.
Yes, Kavita. Yes, you are.
Okay. Thank you, Alia, for this introduction. And as we saw, Mohit and Mohammad Rizal had given us a very good introduction as to what will be the Indian-ASEAN relations in the post-COVID world. So let's see what I have got to add to this. So I'll start with the relationship that India and ASEAN have. The 10 Nation Association of Southeast Asian nations, that we call ASEAN in short, is considered one of the most influential groupings in the region, especially in India. We talk about European Union and then ASEAN in the same breath. That such a good model ASEAN has presented, especially when we compare it with our regional association of which India is part, that is called SAARC, of which India and its neighboring nations are working together, but has not been that successful. So ASEAN has been a kind of model for India. And India and several other countries, including US, China, Japan, and Australia, are the dialogue partners of ASEAN. So it's very successful in that aspect. The ASEAN region, along with India together, comprises a combined population of 1.85 billion people, which is 1/4 of the global population. And their combined GDP has been estimated at over $3.8 billion. So that itself shows that if there is cooperation and if there is development, then this is like huge success. Then investment from ASEAN to India has been over $70 billion US dollars in the last 17 years, which is accounting for more than 17% of India's total FDI. So as we'll see later, it's good, but not sufficient. So as we'll see that later. And India's focus on a multifaceted relationship with ASEAN is an outcome of the significant changes in the world's political and sorry, there's some message. Okay. So India's focus on a multifaceted relationship with ASEAN is an outcome of the significant changes in the world political and economic scenario since the early 1990s, with the fall of the USSR and India's march towards the economic liberalization. So India's search for economic space resulted in Look East policy. The Look East policy today has matured into a dynamic and action-oriented Act East policy. So we have become much more active, as the change in the name suggests. So India is also an active participant in several regional forums like East Asia Summit and ASEAN Regional Forum. So as we'll see, India's relationship with ASEAN is a key pillar of India's foreign policy. India and ASEAN have absorbed more than 25 years of their dialogue partnership. And as we talk about the current situation, so today the world faces an unprecedented problem. None of us have seen a crisis of this proportion before, and indeed uncertainty of this level. How, when, and with what result this pandemic will end is still uncertain and very open sort of question. To extent of its destruction in terms of losses of lives and livelihood is still unclear. The impact of coronavirus has been beyond our collective imagination. There is the contraction of world economy, and it is predicted that it will surely be the largest since the Great Depression. It is against this background that we should discuss our shared prospects between India and ASEAN. The contemporary relationship between India and ASEAN was founded very much on the shared interests of globalization. In Asia, at least, ASEAN countries were pioneer of that and helped India to be part of the globalized world. But as it comes under stress today, as we can see due to we are going back from multilateralism towards more of bilateral talks, and with the China-US trade wars, we can see that as this global order, liberal order comes under stress today, we need to go beyond its economic and even social definitions. Globalization may be reflected as trade, travel, financial flows, but in reality, it is quite larger. In fact, what the pandemic has brought to us is the indivisible aspect of human existence that underpins globalization. As we can see that today we are having this discussion on what will be the future. So despite the pandemic and everything bad that has happened, the human spirit is there to learn from each other and make the future brighter. So whether it is climate change, terrorism, or indeed pandemics, these are not challenges with those affected by it have a choice. It therefore underlines the need for international community to work much more sincerely in search of collective solutions. Uh, so with respect to the future, I will start with the non-conventional aspects. So as we see, we're starting with the healthcare. The pandemic has added to the importance of health security. In July this year, at the 22nd ASEAN-India Senior Officials Meeting, we discussed the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Both sides highlighted their potential cooperation in areas of health, including vaccine production and distribution, and public health emergency, vaccine development, and ensuring its reach to all, sharing their best practices and technology for benefit of all, data sharing for future pandemics, and lessons learned during the coronavirus pandemic. And as we see, the coronavirus disease has caused a severe and multi-dimensional impact on the region, both India as well as ASEAN. And we express our optimism that ASEAN community builds efforts further will continue its pace with ASEAN's strong mettle and self-reliance, as well as with the support of their external partners like India. In the ASEAN-India Senior Officials Meeting, they also discussed ways and means to further strengthen cooperation in several areas of mutual interest, including other non-conventional aspects like terrorism, then violent extremism, then transnational crimes. Other areas under non-conventional aspects on which India and ASEAN can cooperate a lot are development, generation of employment. And then there's very much important aspect of climate change that affects both India and ASEAN. For example, if we talk about this rise of sea level, so that is going to affect a lot of ASEAN countries and as well as India, because both of us have a huge maritime boundary. So in addition to that, there's a lot of scope for disaster management. For example, India and ASEAN can cooperate a lot when it comes to tsunami and earthquake. So I would say these are the areas of non-conventional aspects where we can cooperate in future, and obviously this cooperation will benefit both the countries and lead to further strengthening of ties as well. So now coming to conventional aspects, I will start with the economic domain. So the question was that last year India didn't join RCEP. So RCEP, that is a Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. So India's demands at the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership negotiations, the demand to which India did not join will give us a peek into what we can do in future so that India can be a part of it. Because RCEP has kept the door open for India to join. So basically, India's demands were regarding the shifting the base year for tariff cuts from 2014 to 2019, avoiding a sudden surge in imports from China by including a large number of items in an auto-trigger mechanism, stricter rules of origin to prevent dumping from China, and a better deal in services. So these were India's concern. So the RCEP negotiations, which were launched in 2012, and in 2019, there was a big push to finalize the negotiations. So, but India rejected, though the 15 members have went ahead with it, they have kept the doors open for India. So if we focus on these issues, and the key to solving issues is negotiation. So if we continue negotiations on these issues, then all the members can someday reach on a conclusion, and obviously there'll be compromise on India's side as well as all of the nations part of RCEP. So if there is RCEP which in a format that is acceptable to India with some concessions from India's side, I think this will lead to further strengthening of ties. And so as we can see, the China factor is the key to New Delhi's assessment of costs and benefits here. And obviously all the ASEAN nations are very much aware of India's concerns. Another issue is that there is large trade deficit, while India runs large trade deficit with at least 11 of the 15 RCEP members, where China alone accounts for 53 billion of India's $53 billion dollars of India's $105 billion trade deficit with these countries. So this is a huge number. So this reflects on why there has been so much concern on India's side when it comes to China. So in the times of US-China trade war, ASEAN members must maintain their unity so that they can leverage their centrality in their dealings with major powers and maintain their strategic autonomy. This is completely my opinion, and I think ASEAN has fared very well so far, and these are testing times where it should, further unite. The times demand this unity. And with respect to commerce, in the last 25 years and more, we have been able to make our trade grow 25 times. So this is huge, but much, much below our potential. So we all realize that the potential is much more than that. On the second, this traditional aspect in our relationship, I will talk about connectivity, which Mohit had talked a lot about. I'll just touch upon these issues that are not just so India's northeastern states have a huge potential for development if there is connectivity with the ASEAN members, starting with Myanmar, which touches the Indian border in the northeastern states of India. So not just connecting our northeastern states to the trilateral highway that connects through Myanmar to Thailand and beyond as well, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. So connectivity, both physical, digital, in maritime connectivity, air connectivity. So not just physical, okay? So all these dimensions are very much important. And we know that much of the ASEAN is still not linked. We have huge religious, cultural, and historical ties, but the linkage is still not complete. And as Mohit touched on, Kaladan multimodal projects. So our projects are going very slow. So when, just give me a moment, just give me a moment. Yeah, sorry, there was some disturbance. So yeah, so now talking about the security domain. So starting with the maritime domain. So China is definitely the elephant in the room. So the question we ask in our classes is that can we really talk about ASEAN countries without talking about China in India today? So I think we live in a very interconnected world, and many issues then have a spillover effect on other regions as well. ASEAN was formed in 1967 with two very important drivers. One is Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. Second is a nuclear weapons free zone. Now in South China Sea, the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation has a problem. Since the 2010, the Hanoi meeting, there is no consensus within ASEAN in relations to South China Sea dispute. And since our friends from Indonesia, please correct me later if I'm wrong somewhere in my information, or if you have a different opinion, please be free to comment in. So there is some trouble brewing up within ASEAN, with China militarizing some of the reefs, and we know few ASEAN countries are also doing it. About 3,000-acre lands has been reclaimed within these island reefs. So, okay, so if I go back to the non-conventional issue of environment security and the rights of the fishermen and everything. So the ecosystem that the South China Sea, that is also being very much affected by these island reefs which are being militarized, or some islands which are being artificially constructed. So these will also affect the economy of the countries which are adjacent to the South China Sea, which are obviously ASEAN members. So we have to think in a long-term domain. So going back to the maritime domain, since the Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling in 2016, ASEAN is now a divided house. India has sent a signal of being relatively objective for the rule of law with respect to island sovereignty. For example, uh, India and Bangladesh had a dispute regarding to United Nations Convention on Laws of Seas, and in which India had to give up its two of its island to Bangladesh, and India very rightfully obeyed by the the ruling of the Permanent Court of Arbitration. So in this way, India has set a very good example for its respect for the rule of law. So, with respect to the freedom of navigation, both in Indian Ocean as well as the South China Sea, India has its own concerns in the region because it is roughly about 45 to 50% of India's trade is passing through this region, and the concept of territorial sea, as adopted by China or even Vietnam and Malaysia, is problematic for Indian trade in this region. So to that extent, it is India's self-interest. But for other ASEAN countries as well, obviously these waters are very important. The freedom of navigation provides them as some sort of counter to China, which treats 80% of this 3.4 million square kilometer of South China Sea as its own territory and an undisputed sovereign claim. So India kind of provides a balancing role here, because with the good example that it has
Please, Kavita,
provided.
30 seconds for closing, please.
Okay, sure. So the kind of good example that India has provided with its respecting the Bangladesh, giving the Bangladesh the islands which were mandated by the ruling. So India has kind of provided good example for rule of law. And also there are counter piracy missions, naval exercise and everything. So the relationship is very important for that aspect also. So while concluding, I would say that we should not forget that how much, a lot of perseverance and hard work which we have put in this current relationship, and there is tremendous potential. The thing is that we need to strike the right chords, and we all can benefit from these ties. So be it agriculture, make in India, digital India, host of sectors, there's huge potential due to complementarities. So as I said, we need to strike the right chords. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Ms. Kavita Seuda that has talked about connectivity, globalization aspect, and also environmental aspect that affects how both parties, ASEAN and India, will react to the pandemic. So, without further ado, I'll invite our next panelist, Mr. Daniel Areldi Ritiau, uh, as our next speaker. Before that, Mr. Daniel Areldi Ritiau is an ASEAN Indonesia Youth Ambassador. He is graduating from General Ahmad Yani University. He was an intern in the Political Affairs Department at the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia, Den Haag, Netherlands, and his latest achievement is co-chairing the DI-SEC Council in the Bandung Model United Nations 2020. So, Mr. Daniel Areldi Ritiau, the time and the place is yours.
Right. Thank you for the opportunity. Am I audible? Can you hear me loud and clear? I believe. So,
yes.
First of all, I would like to congratulate Eastern Interest and Ruang Internasional and Jian Li for inviting me and for holding this very outstanding academic forum. I mean, all of us here gathering, we share knowledge, share information, enhance our knowledge capacity on what's going on between ASEAN and India. All right, so without further ado, I'm not going to discuss a lot because previous speakers have already talked about ASEAN and India relations very comprehensively. So I'll just go about certain general issues with highlighting in some specific issues related to India, China, and ASEAN. All right, so let me share screen first. All right, can you see my screen? as you can see, let's move on. Just a short presentation about the ASEAN and India relations. So first of all, if you involve or if you involve in the previous discussion in the first panel, Dr. Kumar outlined the historical connection between India and Southeast Asia region and states. So basically, we have a strong historical ties between India and Southeast Asia. We know that in the ancient time, we have the cultural and religion spread, Hindu, Muslims, Buddhisms, and we also have trade relations in, I believe it's during the reign of Srivijayan Empire when they conduct an expedition to, I believe it's the north. Sorry, so the southern part of India, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so they conduct trade relations, and cultural exchanges have occurred between ancient India's kingdom and Srivijayan Empire. And moving on, we also have another historical similarity, which is both Southeast Asian states and India were former colony of European Empire, be it British Empire, be it Dutch, be it French. I believe India was a former British Empire. Indonesia was, well, not quite, well, despite being ruled by Thomas Stamford Raffles, but yeah, but British did rule our soil for quite some time. And after both ASEAN states and India became an independent country, we again see some similarities on foreign policy outlook after the post-colonialism era and the Cold War period. That's why you can see, I put some pictures of non-aligned movement here, that Mr. Nehru and Mr. Sukarno was a strong counterpart between each other. They have a strong relations. They are the founder of the non-aligned movement. They lead both Indonesia and India very rigorously, very robust, and they also formulate similar approach of not taking sides, neither to the west nor to the east during the Cold War, and they established this non-aligned movement that lasts until now, which also influenced the relations between India, Indonesia, and the rest of Southeast Asian states, who was also the member of non-aligned movement. And after the Cold War ended, after the Soviet was dissolved, we entered the period of globalization and interdependence. Okay, so if you read the book from Robert Keohane and Joseph Nye, Power and Interdependence, Joseph Nye outlined that globalization drives interdependence for cooperation amongst the third world countries, especially. In this context, I'm talking about India's cooperation with ASEAN states. Now, moving on, Now, I would like to highlight the pushing factors or the driving factors that push India to enhance its cooperation and see ASEAN or Southeast Asian region as a strategic region for its national interests. So first of all, we understand, and in the previous panel, you can also understand that India has the look east foreign policy. I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong, okay, my Indian colleagues, but I believe the look east policy was formulated in the 1991 during the Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, if I'm not mistaken, okay? So basically, the look east policy was aimed to cultivate strategic partnership with Southeast Asian nations and bolster India's position as regional power. We know that India has been recognized as one of let's say, upper middle power in terms of speaking in terms of Asian-wise, okay? And India's look east policy proven to have significantly improved New Delhi's relation with ASEAN since 1992. You know, the start of the ASEAN and India relation when India became a sectoral dialogue partner with ASEAN, and then Moving on to 95, India became the full dialogue partner, and India also joined the ASEAN Regional Forum in 96. And then India also became a state party on Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in 2003. And in this modern era, under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India decided to improve the Look East foreign policy approach into Act East policy, as I believe it will be more active in engaging its counterparts in Southeast Asia. So that's number one. Number two, we already see and we already discussed previously about how China really influenced the geopolitical condition in Southeast Asia. And Look East policy or Act East policy was formulated in order to balance China's increasing presence in the region. Well, I will get back to this at the end of the session. So moving on, the relations so far between ASEAN and India, as we can see from time to time, have developed very, very intense, have become very, very cooperative between two parties. Like in 5 November 2002, India and ASEAN held its first summit on Cambodia. And through that continuous progress, continuous summit, they also create the Partnership Plan of Action for Peace, Progress, and Prosperity, which again formulated to enhance strategic partnership between both parties in all areas of common interest, be it political and security, like economic and trade, social culture, connectivity, and other relevant aspects that cross their interest between ASEAN and India. Moving on, then come the COVID-19 pandemic. Like the previous speaker, I've outlined how COVID-19 really wreaked havoc in international relations, in global situations, especially speaking in third world countries, India and ASEAN states. You know, we have seen how many people die, how many people get infected due to the COVID-19. So in response to this crisis, ASEAN and India has formulated or strengthened their partnership in mitigating the COVID-19 pandemic. I believe India is supplying pharmaceutical and medical supplies to Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, I believe. Thailand, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about Thailand. I believe these three, yeah. These three, and then they also conduct information sharing and exchange of experts, Singapore especially, with Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei also, I believe. And also cooperation between India and ASEAN have helped India to conduct its citizen repatriation mission, also known as the Fandi Barat mission. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, okay, my Indian colleague. So, if we learn from time to time the development of ASEAN and India's relation, we can see that we can also understand that India, amongst other states, external state partners, have become an important strategic partners for ASEAN from time to time, and India also look ASEAN as a strategic partner to enhance its cooperation and to secure its national interests and foreign policy. So, after understanding that, we should see that there are challenges, there are future prospects, there are opportunities for ASEAN and India's relation, especially in post-pandemic relation after the COVID-19 pandemic ended. In this section, I will outline certain challenges and certain issues that created opportunities for both ASEAN and India. And if you also take a look a moment at this picture, I mean, you know, India and ASEAN have rigorously reached their strategic partnership, enhance their strategic collaboration, and then on the back you look at the Xi Jinping watching on the back, watching how India might become its counterbalance in the region. So first of all, COVID-19 outbreak really have diminished the spirit of global cooperation. I mean, we understand how we can see how WHO, the drama between the United States, WHO, China, like the United States really withdraw, and they don't trust WHO, they don't trust China, they don't trust anyone, and they really put their own interests at bay. And even though it has to raise their relations with other countries, and also WHO doesn't understand what to do, and China also responded the same towards the US, and there's a drama in the global relation that have caused the absence of global leadership in the current situation. Therefore, this dying global multilateralism provides an opportunity for ASEAN and India to strengthen their ties and help in reviving a stronger global governance to mitigate the epidemic, and therefore formulate a comprehensive collective action to tackle further or future pandemic that will come later on. Next one is something that we have to learn from the COVID-19 epidemic, that COVID-19 is indeed a very complex and a very multidimensional crisis that involve numerous consideration aspects. I mean, you cannot merely say that COVID-19 is just a health issue. No, I think it will be so inaccurate, because from health issue, it also impacts the economy, it also impacts the security, it also impacts the political situation, it also impacts the connectivity. I mean, many layers, many aspects are considered in this mitigation of the pandemic. So understanding that such pandemic like COVID-19 is a very complex and involve multiple consideration aspects, I suggest that ASEAN and India post-pandemic relations should focus more on economic and trade agreements. That's number one. Be it strengthening economic partnership. I believe currently we have the free trade agreement between India and ASEAN, and also enhancement of trade agreements. The erasing tax, erasing trade barriers, be it travel bubble negotiation, which is very important in current times. And also in times of COVID-19, we have adapted to what is named as technology, digital. Everything has become digital, including economy. And economy also has moved into the digital platform. And I believe that digital economic partnership between ASEAN and India can help them strengthen their relation, and also help them to tackle future pandemics such as COVID-19. Now, aside from economic and trade agreements, disaster management is another area which requires the utmost attention for two parties. See, through partnership with ASEAN Center of Disaster Management, I believe that India may strengthen their disaster management infrastructure, and also they have the capabilities to synergize multilateral mechanisms and communications on disaster prevention and mitigation, as well as enhancing preparedness and response system to further prevent such pandemic from happening again. Or maybe they understand what to do, they understand what policy should be taken, they understand what steps should be taken to tackle or to face this such pandemic wisely and correctly. And also strengthening cooperation in medical and health system is of a paramount importance for both parties. I believe this is also outlined in ASEAN and India Plan of Action. The new Plan of Action was released, I believe, on July. Yeah, I believe on July. But unfortunately, like the previous panel previous speakers have stated that the POA, after I read that, they haven't outlined the mechanisms, the capability, or the systems on how to tackle such pandemic like COVID-19. I mean, it's very unfortunate. You encountered this pandemic, and then you talk about a lot of stuff, and then you just, you didn't include that in your plan of action. That's kind of weird for me. So I believe that
Mr.
this
Daniel,
partnership.
sorry, but 30 seconds to closing, please.
All right. So let me finish first. Okay. So overall, like medical and health system have the opportunity in improving the quality of medical product quality and improving and enhancing health system and infrastructure for both ASEAN and India. And for concluding remarks, actually, I believe that Southeast Asia region offers a promising chance for the future success of India's Act East policy. Future multilateral ties with ASEAN provides a window for India to ramp up its public diplomacy in Southeast Asia through the Act East policy to undertake mutually beneficial collaboration, and ultimately, this will help New Delhi in broadening the scope of the Act East policy and hence increasing the probability to secure greater legitimacy for regional partnership with ASEAN and also secure its position as a regional power and provider of regional security in Southeast Asia. I actually still have some discussion left about South China Sea, but I think I will leave that for the question and answer session. Thank you very much, moderator. I give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel, for the insightful presentation. I can see that Mr. Daniel has explained the historical similarity between the both parties, ASEAN and India, but nonetheless, the outbreak still leave a hopeless spirit among the states to mobile and move because it affects multi-level dimension. But it doesn't mean that it cannot help both parties strengthen their ties. So we will move on to the Q&A sessions. Now we will open the Q&A sessions and do the limited time. We will only open 2 sections only. Each section will have 3 participants to go and ask the questions to the speakers. So for section 1, any questions? You can guys click the raise hand button and the MC or the co-host will let you go for the questions. Or if you want, you can just type your questions in the box, in the chat box features of the Zoom chat. Thank you.
I think there is one question given by one of the participants to all the panelists. I think maybe you can read the question.
Oh, yes. Okay. From Indah Septika, all the panelists' perspective, how you looking the existence and the role of international organization or international institution to fighting the pandemics and how the impact for ASEAN-India relations itself. Okay, thank you for the questions. I think we can begin with Mr. Mohit Kumar as the first panelist to answer the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Elia. I have actually read the question, and I would like to say from an Indo-Asean perspective that the future lies in the hands of strategic autonomy in terms of controlling the global supply chains. We can say that WHO can, certainly intervene in the, supplying the emergency services, the medical emergency COVID kits, or maybe some medicine, antiviral medicines and all. But I think Indo-ASEAN future purely depends on controlling the global supply chains, because China is, the manufacturing hub of in terms of medicines and all. So, and lot of countries are now trying to shift their manufacturing companies from China to other countries. They are looking for other locations because of what actually panned out in the COVID-19 crisis. A lot of allegations were made on China. So there's also a lot of trust deficit, I would say. So not only from a perspective of international organization, but I think now is the time to shape the order of Asia so as to say, India and ASEAN being the fulcrum of and being the driving force to shape the future of Asia in the post-COVID world, purely on basis of what India can do, because we also need to remember what India did in terms of supplying hydroxychloroquine chloroquine tablets and paracetamol tablets and COVID-19 kits, testing kits to the neighboring countries. Although they didn't do it in a magnanimous manner with the ASEAN nations, but I think that can be the thing for improvement. They can look to especially prioritize Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, because they lie in the sub-regional cooperation under Mekong Ganga cooperation. So they can, elevate the partnership, the COVID-19 collaboration, so as to say, alongside this Mekong Ganga cooperation. So I would just like to conclude that COVID-19 has impacted the trans-regional, trade links, but the global supply chains lies in the hands of India and ASEAN. I think that this can be the thing that will challenge China, and we can certainly see a tremendous shift in the world order, so as to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for Mr. Mohit Kumar. We can move to Mr. Muhammad Rizal to give the answer to the questions.
I think for me, like the existence of international organization is very important to be a source of consultancy for ASEAN in order to tackle the problem within the region. Because in the other hand, we don't have such a collective action, I mean a single action that becomes something permanent to follow. So if you take a look to the experience of each countries in ASEAN, you can see how Indonesia, how country like a in the sub-region, especially in the China region, they have a different approach in terms of handling the COVID-19. And if you take a look, the country that close to Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Indonesia, Vietnam, and also Indonesia, Brunei, and the Philippines, they also have a different different approach in terms of how the government handling the pandemic itself. So the existence of other international organizations such as the European Union, for example, WHO, United Nations, are one of the tremendous thing that ASEAN should refer to. Because why? Because from this organization, they could have a multiple perspective in terms of tackling the problem within the region, or even they can, do strategic partnership or dialogue to combating the pandemic. And also they can play an important role in order to exchange such a collaboration in terms of health cooperation itself. Because since we know, if we take a look for the historical period in terms of the cooperation among ASEAN and its strategic partnership, it refers to trade, security, economic, and also politics. But we have a small number in terms of health cooperation. So this pandemic shows us that ASEAN should invest more to research and development in terms of healthcare and also health equipment in order to prepare themselves to tackle the problem for the next pandemic in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Muhammad Rizal, for the explanations. Now we'll move to Ms. Kavita. Ms. Kavita, please give your answer to the questions.
Yeah, hello. I think this is a wonderful question, but in my opinion, the future is rather bleak or somewhat dull for the role of international organizations that they'll play when it comes to pandemic. Because in general, talking about international organizations, the viewpoint is becoming more and more divided between US and China, in wherever the interests collide. So there is a lot of division and lack of cohesive action. And especially with respect to the impending US elections, I think a lot depends on what is the results of the elections. So, US tracing itself back from the leadership role that it has taken, for example, what we have seen under the presidency of Mr. Trump. So a lot depends on US leadership, and as well as I think things are going to be really complicated and unpredictable with the rise of China. And so I think the international organizations won't be playing that much of an effective role as we had expected in the past. So it's more on bilateral or relations or between India or ASEAN, for example, forums. So I think it's tracing back from international organizations to bilateral ties. So I'm not that optimistic about the role of international organizations.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kavita. Now we'll move to Mr. Daniel. Mr. Daniel, can you please give the answers? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is a very critical question. My point of view is that even though international organization continues to fail in time to time, but we have to see that IO is an important aspect of global governance. International institutions is an important aspect of global governance. We need global governance. COVID-19 mitigation needs global governance, and global governance also needs IOs. IOs need states. States needs its citizens. So, all in all, I believe that international organizations still play some crucial role, especially in formulating international norms and international laws. Kant's Means and Styles, in his book International Organization in terms of global governance, they outline that IO really sets some guideline for member states to take collective action in certain issue in this context, COVID-19 pandemic, to create some collective action that can be taken and can solve global problems comprehensively. So we can also see that IO can set some guidelines. They issue norms, they issue international laws, followed as a cornerstone for states' foreign policy in tackling some certain international issues like COVID-19. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for all the panelists that already answered the questions. Miss Indah, is that quite clear? So we can move to the next questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for asking. And next we'll have another questions from Mr. Abiodai Sisodia. Can ASEAN come out without choosing sides in the post-pandemic world that is staying away from Chinese and US zone of influence? Mr. Abiodai Sisodia, to whom your questions is directed to?
Whoever seems fit to, whoever seems most comfortable to answer the question.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
to the panelists, maybe one of you can give explanations to the questions. Thank you.
May I?
Yes, go on, Mr. Muhammad Rizal Sain.
In my perspective, I think choosing a side from these two biggest trading partners are really hard because these two parties, Chinese and US, play an important role in the aspect of political, economy, and security cooperation among the member states of ASEAN. Especially if we take a look at Chinese government's rise in 21st century with their economic and with expanding of economic and also political and military ties within the region in Southeast Asia, we couldn't even say that it should be separated because, in the northern part of Southeast Asia, if you take a look, especially a country located in Indochina Peninsula, you can see like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos PDR, and Myanmar. they are a part, they are, a cluster of countries in Southeast Asia that belongs to China the most, except their ideology and even their. But in the other hand, they have a very strong relation with China in terms of cooperation for the infrastructure project itself. Like, if we can say that these nations are included in BRI initiative, and they are a part of China's strategic project in Southeast Asia, and also China's ally, if I can say that can counter every single cases that bleach into the ASEAN table to be discussed in the institution called ASEAN. This nation could be a counter of Chinese government within the region itself. So in the other hand, if you take a look at uh, aside choose like be alone, and aside from this U.S. and Chinese government, I think we couldn't even do that, because like the country like the Philippines, they have a very strong ties with U.S. government, because historically they have been colonized by the U.S. at the time, and they have a strong relation in terms of a military cooperation politics with the U.S. government. So I think like country like Indonesia, even they say that they are not belong to these two great power and superpower, but most of the cooperation, most of the tendency in terms of the cooperation always refers to these two great power, because the domination of the economy and major political power and their leadership in a global order represent themselves and bring themselves to be one of something that could be counted on very important strategy partners itself. So this is my own perspective regarding to this question. Thank you.
I would like to add something to this explanation with respect to Abodhya Sisodia's question. So, in my opinion, we know that great powers define international politics. So, US is the established great power, and China is a revisionist power in Asia and more so in the global order. So it is very difficult to escape from the influence of these two, and it will become more and more difficult to balance the two. For example, both are great economic partners of ASEAN, and also they lie in the periphery of China. So China has many infrastructure projects, and it is giving huge loans and everything in ASEAN region as well, and specifically countries which are adjacent to China. So I think it is going to be difficult to take sides, and I fear that it might lead to further division of views inside ASEAN, and create problems for the unity of ASEAN as a forum. So I think this staying away is not an option. For example, India tried non-alignment right after its independence. So it chose to decide on a case-to-case basis and not be in permanent influence of any of the blocs. But what we see that ultimately, though unofficially, India had to choose the Soviet bloc. So basically, when it comes to great power politics, so it is very difficult to move away from their influence, and ultimately that might as I said, affect the unity of the bloc itself. That is my response.
Thank you so much for Ms. Kavita and Mr. Muhammad Rizal. Has any other panelists want to answer the questions? Maybe Mr. Mohit or Mr. Daniel?
Okay,
Okay, Daniel, you go ahead first.
thank you, Mr. Kumar. So I agree with both previous speakers' answers. I believe that it depends. I mean, choosing sides in international relations, it's very hard for third world countries in ASEAN, especially, not to choose sides between great powers, between China and the United States, as they are still developing countries. Well, actually, short answer, they can, if they think they are great. if they think they can handle the global dynamics, politics themselves, then I believe ASEAN states have the capability to be independent from global powers. But I think it's very, very unlikely. Even supranationalist regional organizations like EU, they have to choose sides. They have to choose sides between China and the United States, and they choose United States. In one moment later, they choose China. And that's about global relations. You cannot just separate from choosing. Even though Indonesia state that they are, free and active foreign policy, but in the end, during Pak Sukarno's era, we are very close to Soviets. During Pak Suharto's era, we are close to US, and currently we are very, very close to China. So it's very hard. It's very unlikely for ASEAN states to free themselves to become an independent group of states in international politics.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, sure, go on.
I just want to add to the previous speakers. I agree with Kavita and Mohammed when they said that it is difficult to choose sides, and it is really not in the hands of ASEAN anymore. But if we see from the South China Sea perspective, the control over oil, gas, and everything, and the island reefs, the illegal capture of island reefs by China, that's and the assertive military and political and economic rise of China puts these things into it's into actually a non negotiator, because for China, for ASEAN countries, and actually that ASEAN plus 3, the ASEAN plus 3 initiative, under that rubric, ASEAN is still negotiating technological and multi-sectoral technological awareness and assistance in terms of COVID-19 challenges. To overcome COVID-19 challenges, they are still liable to learn from China. So how can they leave China's side? And growing economic and political clout of China, I think that suppresses all possibilities of ASEAN to emerge as an independent regional bloc. But I think Indo-ASEAN relationship can really drive this possibility of as an of emergence of a new kind of world order, regional world order, I would say, that talks about strategical autonomy and the COVID-19 response, how they tackle the COVID-19 challenges. That would, I think, dictate what will happen in the future. And also the US elections that Kavita mentioned, that is also very pivotal, to see what kind of response US adopts in terms of COVID-19 challenges. Thank you.
Now, I would like to request Ilya that I think we have more than enough questions and all the speakers answered very well. So we can conclude this panel.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay. How about the other questions that left?
I think we have already exceeded our time limit. So, yeah.
Okay, so due to the limited time, we would like to express our apologize for anybody that has left the questions in the chat box within the Zoom chat features. Due to the limited time, I think I can conclude that from these panelist discussions that there are many effects that this pandemic affecting to both ASEAN and India within the relations that ties between the two of the parties. There are connectivity, globalization aspect that yes can help the two parties ties their or strengthen their relations, but it is still remain the dilemmas between the both parties that this pandemic affects not just an economic level but multidimensional level. How educations, uh, economics, politics, and all of that help create some strain in the relations, not just between uh, member states within ASEAN, but also the relations between ASEAN and India. So thank you for all the panelists that has gathered today. Do we have time for each panelist to express their short, maybe 30 seconds closing remarks? Can we do that? Or
Yeah,
should,
sure.
oh, okay. So I think for each panelist can just 30 seconds express their closing remarks due to their materials. Thank you. Start from Mr. Mohit Kumar.
Thank you, Elia, once again, and thank you, Eastern Interest and Ruang International. This was my first experience with the Indonesian youth organization. I'm very happy to have attended this webinar, and I think it would be a fruitful and insightful talk for anyone that is interested in Indo-Pacific region. And we have really shared some broad insights today. I would just like to add a little note to the latest question that has been asked. I think India can help with the integrated disease surveillance report. Surveillance, something they have come up to ensure the kind of vaccines they will work on with India between India and ASEAN. So I think that can be the answer for that portal. I think, yeah, IDSB, Integrated Disease Surveillance Portal. They can help up with that initiative in terms of vaccines. So once again, thank you to all the fellow speakers. Also, they enlightened us with some broad insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohit Kumar. And then Mr. Muhammad Rizal Sainon, please.
I would like to say thank you very much for Eastern Interest and also Ruang International for consolidate this important and respected forum to bring the idea and also the topic of India-ASEAN relation, because these two respective regions are very strategic and important region for the world, and not only in the region but for the world as well. So my closing remarks is all about like the future is always belongs to those who, who try to build connectivity and strategic partnership among others, like what ASEAN and India already did before. And I believe with strong commitment in terms of building partnership and also cooperation, it would help to decrease the tension in terms of economically, politically, and security in the region, not only in ASEAN but also in South Asia and India alone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muhammad Rizal Sainon. Now we can go for Miss Kavita. Miss Kavita.
Yeah, first of all, I would really like to thank Eastern Interest for giving me this wonderful opportunity, and I'm very glad to interact with the people from Indonesia and this wonderful opportunity that Ruang International has created. So I think hopefully we can see more of this in the future, and what the kind of discussion we are having, that is very much in the spirit of India-ASEAN relationship, globalization, exchanging views, more of cooperation, knowing each other better. Because I think, in my opinion, talks solve half of the issues, and they let us know more about each other and what are the issues, how they can be solved. So we are exactly doing here right now, and as we are all like students, so hopefully we'll be able to understand the relations much better in the future, thanks to this practical experience. So thanks to both of you. And I would just conclude that you know there is a lot of scope in India ASEAN relationships, but we need to work for it. Like the connectivity issues, they're going very slow, and with the US China trade war and other issues, it is going to be difficult in the relations. But and I would like to add one more point which was not mentioned during the talk, that India is having border issue with China, and that is going on currently on the border. And in July, if I'm not wrong, around 20 Indian soldiers were also killed in the skirmishes. So and the matter has not been solved completely, and this has the pandemic and this issue and everything has given rise to a lot of nationalism in almost all the countries, and especially in India also, and many ASEAN countries as well. And there was this question regarding the impact on democracies as well. So I think it will be hard for India to de-hyphen China ASEAN relations in the future, and Chinese aspect will be a major role to play in how India views relations with ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Ms. Kavita Seude. Now I'll leave to Mr. Daniel. Mr. Daniel, can you please give us the closing remarks? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, once again, thank you for Eastern Interest and Ruang International for this wonderful opportunity and for this wonderful academic forum. This is very, very fruitful discussion indeed. And it's very exciting to be here to discuss matters with my Indian colleagues. I hope you are doing well in India, and I hope everyone here will prosper and stay healthy for everyone. And for the concluding remarks, I would just like to say that ASEAN and India has become a very, very strategic partners in terms of regional relations. And I believe that in the post-pandemic relation, ASEAN and India needs to strengthen their ties even more, because in this age of modern global multilateralism, geopolitics course in Indo-Pacific will either be defined by India's full engagement with ASEAN, or by rising China's expansive unilateralism in Southeast Asia and Indo-Pacific. So I think that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all the panelists today that has given us a fruitful and insightful discussions and materials. Now, me as moderator will close these discussions and give it back to the MC. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much to Elia as our moderator for leading this discussion in this panel, in the second panel, and thank you so much to all the speakers in the second panel. We are going to end this session of this event today. Once more, thank you for all speakers, either in the first panel or the second panel. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, and I hope it's very useful for all of us here. And me as I'm a master of ceremony, it has been my pleasure to be an MC for this event today, and thank you for all participants for making time to join us here today. And as a part of Ruang Internasional, I would like to thank you to Eastern Interest too as our partner in this event. We have done, guys, such a nice collaboration. And well, that's wrap up our event for today. And see you on the next event, guys. I wish you all a pleasant today.
Thank you so much, Eastern Interest, Ruang
Thank you so
International.
much. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you so much, Ruang International.
I
Really,
think we can take a group photos.
Senpai, Subho Senpai is there. So all our seniors, all our classmates, and Ruang International team. Thank you so much, each and everyone, especially Kavita, who was the second speaker for the youth panel. Thank you so much, Kavita, for accepting our invitation once again. And thank you so much, Ruang International team. Ruang
Completely
International.
my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again. Okay, with
About
this, I think
we take the
Genial
group
is saying
photos.
something.
Photo session for closing this event today.
Maybe all the participants.
Yeah, all the participants can open your camera to take a photo.
Yeah, we can take a snapshot.
Mr. Janli can help to take a screenshot for this screen.
Yeah, I think most of the participants has opened their camera.
Maybe some of you also can take. So
I use the smartphone Zoom app. I cannot.
okay.
So
It's
do
really hard for me because I
Maybe
use my
hard for
laptop.
me.
Yeah, it's
Sorry.
maybe
quite really hard for
this
me.
right.
Yeah, I think you can simply like take a screenshot and then after that everybody will show their smile and to the screen and everybody like wow hi and
Yeah,
whatsoever.
sure. Yeah, sure, sure, sure.
You're
So
here.
three, we can do this. Yeah, yes, right. So 3, 2. When I say one, 3, 2, 1. Say cheese. Somebody please take the picture if everyone is. Okay, I will take the 3, 2, 1. Cheese. Sorry. Okay, okay. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Okay. Bye bye.
Thank
Take care. Stay
you.
safe.
Thank
Stay healthy.
you.
Thank you
Bye.
so
Thank you very
much.
much. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
So much,
Oh,
guys.
nice
From
to
Thank
meet
you
Japan.
you
so much.
guys.
Stay
Everyone.
healthy, everyone.
See
Stay
you in
healthy.
another
Stay safe.
event.
Everyone stay healthy.
See you in another occasion. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Nice
Bye
to
bye
meet
bye
you
bye. I'm
all.
going. Take care. Bye, India. Thank you so much for
Thank
moderating the
you.
second
Thank you
session.
so
And
much.
India. And thank you so much, Geniali, once again. Bye bye. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.